Wedding night, my comatose husband suddenly held me. The top-tier wealthy magnate, Shi Xiu Yan, unexpectedly fell into a coma. A mysterious expert claimed that only marriage could offer him a slim chance of survival. So, Su Yu married him and became his bride. At first, countless people were waiting to see the spectacle, but on their wedding night, Shi Xiu Yan suddenly woke up. Chapter 1, Substitute Bride. At the door, Su Yu's face was pale and her eyes were cold as she listened to the sounds coming from inside the room. Minaching. A woman's flirtatious voice and a man's lewd laugh came through the crack in the door. Su Yu stood rigid like a statue, her heart sinking as she recognized the voices of her boyfriend and her sister. Hurry, the Shi family is coming to take Yu back. Su Qing said. What's the rush? Are you sure that once Su Yu marries into the Shi family, she'll obediently listen to us? Fang Qingming hesitated slightly. To be honest, it's better if you marry into the Shi family yourself. When that short-lived man dies, the huge inheritance will be all yours. Su Yu could no longer bear to listen. With a kick, she slammed the door open and gritted her teeth. Fang Qingming, how could you betray me too? The couple on the bed didn't panic when they saw her enter. Instead, they lazily pulled the blanket over their bodies, clearly indifferent. What betrayal is this? Su Yu, I only pursued you because you looked good. You didn't think I actually wanted to marry you, did you? You're just a country bumpkin abandoned by your family, with nothing but your looks. You even have to work to pay for your own tuition. What makes you think you're worthy of me, a rich second generation? Fang Qingming said, showing no shame as he wrapped his arm around Su Qing's bare shoulder and scoffed, only someone like Qingqing, a wealthy young lady, is my equal. Su Yu was about to laugh in anger. Fang Qingming was someone she met in college. Though he was from a wealthy family, he was gentle and considerate, and he pursued her seriously for 4 years. She thought he was a rare good man and finally agreed to date him after graduation. But who would have thought that she had been blind all this time? It was all a lie. Fang Qingming had followed her to the Su family after he learned she was being sent back there. His real intention was to seduce her good sister, Su Qing. Su Yu's fists clenched, making a cracking sound. Su Qing, however, smiled proudly and arrogantly. Su Yu, so what if I stole your boyfriend? Are you going to hit me? Do you not want your mother's heirlooms anymore? The words hit Su Yu like a cold slap, instantly calming her down. That's right. The reason she returned to the Su family and agreed to this ridiculous substitute marriage was to retrieve her mother's heirlooms and investigate the truth behind her mother's death. With a faint sneer, Su Yu wiped away the tear that had welled up in her eyes, then turned and walked downstairs. Her true identity was not that of a discarded daughter of the Su family, but rather, what was owed to her would eventually be repaid, with interest. Hopefully, by that day, Fang Qingming would regret his choice. Soon, the Shi family's wedding procession arrived, and Su Qing and Fang Qingming quickly straightened their clothes and hurried downstairs. The butler of the Shi family got out of the car, his sharp eyes falling on Su Yu, who was dressed in a traditional Chinese wedding gown. Miss Su, the auspicious hour has arrived. We are here to escort you to your wedding. As soon as he finished speaking, someone behind him shoved a large, red-crowned rooster with a bright red flower tied to its head into Su Yu's arms. The rooster fluttered nervously, and Su Yu pretended to be caught off guard, startled, and accidentally dropped the rooster. It squawked loudly and ran around in a panic. Quick! Get the chicken, quickly, find it. The butler's eyelids twitched, sensing an ominous omen. In the first step of the wedding procession, the bride had already lost their groom. This rooster, adorned with her husband's birthdate and horoscope, was meant to symbolize the groom and was brought as a part of the wedding procession. It was supposed to bring good luck. The rooster leaped straight onto Su Qing's head, and she turned pale in terror, screaming in horror. Fang Qingming rushed to save her but ended up getting scratched by the sharp claws of the chicken, leaving several bloody marks on his arms. Su Yu stood in the corner, leisurely watching the chaos unfold. Her angle of throwing the chicken earlier was quite good. It took a while before the rooster was caught, and the butler's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. Su Yu's parents were laughing awkwardly beside him, trying to smooth things over. What's going on? Does your Su family have objections to our marriage with the Shi family? The butler said coldly, holding the rooster that had been retrieved. No. Su Yu's father quickly apologized, while her mother, still smiling, walked over and reached for Su Yu. Su Yu gently called out, taking a small step back and dodging her mother's black hand, but her brow furrowed slightly, and she appeared to suppress some pain, a few tears welling in her eyes. Her mother was a bit surprised. She hadn't actually touched this troublesome daughter, so why was she crying in pain? Could it be a mistake? But there was no time to think further. She gritted her teeth and sneered at Su Muyu. Muyu, apologize now. Sorry. Su Muyu lowered her head and muttered an apology in a pitiful tone, but her lowered eyes were filled with a smile. The butler noticed the subtle motion from Su Muyu's mother and frowned slightly, but he didn't comment further. After all, this marriage was nothing more than a transaction. The Shi family had provided a dowry of 10 million and an opportunity for a significant business partnership. Miss Su, please make sure to hold onto your husband properly, the butler said coldly. Of course. Su Muyu lowered her head and obediently took the rooster into her arms. Let us go. Once everything seemed fine, the butler didn't bother to speak to Su Muyu's parents. Su Muyu carried the rooster and got into the Shi family's car. Before getting in, she noticed Su Qing's malicious grin on her face. Originally, the Su family had intended for Su Qing to marry into the Shi family. Su Muyu curled the corners of her lips into a mocking smile. Based on the information she had, if Su Qing had gone to the hospital, her repeated abortion records would have instantly enraged the Shi family. Not only would they have lost any chance of gaining benefits, but they might have even ruined the Su family overnight, forcing them to declare bankruptcy. It was because of this that Su Muyu's father had remembered her his daughter, who had been abandoned in the countryside, and brought her back to take Su Qing's place. When Su Muyu had first received the news, she hadn't intended to get involved. But her father had been adamant, claiming he had her late mother's personal belongings for her. Chapter 2, A Hallucination. Su Muyu was startled and instinctively tried to pull away from Shi Xiu Yan. It was said that a year ago, Shi Xiu Yan had been in a car accident, and the vehicle was completely totaled. Miraculously, Shi Xiu Yan didn't die but was rushed to the hospital just in time to cling to life. People in S-City were saying that if it weren't for the Shi family's wealth keeping him alive, Shi Xiu Yan would have been dead long ago. Even though he was still physically alive, his mind had died. The hospital had confirmed that he was in a vegetative state. Recently, the Shi family had been making a big show of finding a bride to bring him luck, hoping that a new bride would either revive his health or, failing that, help them produce an heir through artificial insemination to carry on the family name. Cluck. The rooster panicked and jumped off the bed, feathers fluttering down. Just as Su Muyu was trying to get up from Shi Xiu Yan's body, her pupils suddenly contracted. A pair of dark, deep eyes, exuding an inexplicable coldness, were staring at her. Su Muyu was too shocked to speak. The man's oppressive gaze made it clear that this was no illusion. Shi Xiu Yan had truly woken up. The man, once confirmed by the hospital to have brain death and be in a vegetative state, had actually opened his eyes. Who are you? Shi Xiu Yan's voice was hoarse, his cold eyes fixed on Su Muyu. His thin lips parted, and each word seemed to send a chill straight to her heart. Su Muyu blinked in surprise and quickly realized, "You're awake." Really awake. Shi Xiu Yan furrowed his brows, confused by the woman dressed in a bridal gown, with her hand pressing against his chest and half of her body on top of him. He thought for a moment, then his gaze became sharp and cold. Get off. He tried to shake off the woman but realized his whole body was stiff and unable to move. Su Muyu immediately realized how ambiguous her position was and quickly climbed off him. She noticed Shi Xiu Yan's face was pale and awkward, which made her face heat up. She quickly cleared her throat and said, "Wait here. I'll go get someone." Su Muyu slapped her own face and immediately adopted a timid, frightened expression. With a look of excitement, she rushed to the hallway and called out, "Someone, come quickly. Shi Xiu Yan is awake. Hurry." Xiu Yan woke up. Really? Xiu Yan woke up. Mrs. Shi, upon hearing the news, hurriedly ran in, trembling as she asked, looking toward the room. The butler and others followed her, their faces filled with excitement. Su Muyu entered the room, ready to explain how Shi Xiu Yan had awakened. But she stopped when she saw the atmosphere in the room had changed. Mrs. Shi was silently wiping her tears while staring at Shi Xiu Yan, who lay motionless on the bed, eyes closed. His pale face, once resembling a sculpted statue, still carried a sickly hue, and he had returned to his previous, lifeless state. If it weren't for Su Muyu's confidence in her own sanity, she would have thought what had just happened was all a hallucination. Xiu Yan, wake up. Mommy is here. Open your eyes and look at me. Mrs. Shi cried out, her voice breaking as she called for her son. The butler's excitement had completely disappeared. He shot a cold glare at Sumuyu, clearly believing she was mocking them. Soon, a doctor arrived with the necessary equipment. Mrs. Shi and the others made way for him as he began to check Shi Xiu Yan's body. After a while, the doctor stood up and silently shook his head at Mrs. Shi. The situation hadn't changed. It was confirmed that the patient would not wake up. Mrs. Shi's body swayed as if she might collapse, but the butler quickly supported her. After the doctor left, Sumuyu stepped forward, intending to explain that Shi Xiu Yan had indeed woken up and even spoken to her. Slap. A harsh slap landed across her face. Sumuyu's eyes turned cold, but she remembered her role and instantly reacted as if frightened, stumbling back and sitting on the floor, narrowly avoiding Mrs. Shi's hand. Just as Mrs. Shi was about to lash out, Sumuyu covered her mouth and choked out, "I really saw it. I really did." Mrs. Shi had already been mentally preparing herself for the worst, accepting that Shi Xiu Yan might not make it and preparing for artificial insemination. To have Sumuyu play such a cruel trick, claiming that Shi Xiu Yan had woken up, was an unbearable shock. Mrs. Shi could barely contain her fury. "Next time, I'll have your whole family begging on the streets." Mrs. Shi seethed, her dislike for Sumuyu growing by the second. I didn't lie. Sumuyu tried to explain, but when she saw the angry, almost bloodshot expression on Mrs. Shi's face, she gave up on trying to defend herself. "I'm sorry, I was wrong." Sumuyu pursed her lips, casting a quick glance at Shi Xiu Yan's still form before lowering her head to apologize. Mrs. Shi, still emotionally unstable, was helped away by the butler. The room fell silent. Sumuyu closed the door behind her. The rooster was huddled in the corner, its red flower crown having fallen off at some point. She furrowed her brows and walked to the bedside, staring at Shi Xiu Yan's cold, stern face. "Shi Xiu Yan, are you awake?" There was no response, and the room was eerily quiet. Sumuyu gently nudged him, but he remained still, as if he had never woken up at all. Recalling the moment she had fallen earlier, she wondered if there was a special trigger needed. She decided to try again, flinging herself onto his body and pressing down, waiting for a response. But the man beneath her remained unresponsive. "All right, I guess it was just a hallucination," she muttered. After several unsuccessful attempts, Sumuyu finally gave up. Perhaps she was just too tired. Exhausted and hungry, she climbed into bed and lay down beside Shi Xiu Yan, keeping a fist's distance between them. "Shi Xiu Yan, wake up. Hey, you still don't know, do you? Today." Sumuyu glanced at the rooster in the corner and couldn't help but laugh. "A chicken married me on your behalf. Har, can you believe it?" As she spoke, she slowly drifted off to sleep. Unbeknownst to her, Shi Xiu Yan's brow had furrowed slightly for a moment. The next morning, the butler came in early, tending to Shi Xiu Yan before leading Sumuyu to the main hall. She had gone without food the night before, and no matter how much they disliked her as the young mistress, they couldn't let her starve. The long hallway twisted and turned, passing by an artificial pond with expensive greenery on either side, creating a pleasing atmosphere. Sumuyu couldn't help but marvel at how wealthy the Shi family was. They truly were a top-tier family. It didn't take long before they arrived at a larger villa. The luxurious dining table in the grand hall was already occupied by several people. As soon as Sumuyu entered, sharp, scrutinizing gazes fell on her. "Miss Su, last night, Shi Xiu Yan, he." A beautiful, gentle-looking young woman sobbed, pausing for a moment before muttering, "Why give someone hope only to?" Sumuyu froze mid-step as a strong, bitter tea smell filled the air. She narrowed her eyes and began to assess the woman. Was Shi Xiu Yan the only son? The sudden malice. As expected, when the woman finished speaking, Mrs. Shi's eyes turned red, and she glared coldly at Sumuyu. Chapter 3, The Sleazy Relative. Last night, when Sumuyu first heard the news that Shi Xiu Yan had woken up, she allowed herself to hold onto the last shred of hope. Unfortunately, it turned out to be just a trick by Sumuyu, a mere attempt to create a good luck effect to help the Su family extract more benefits. Mrs. Shi had held herself together for a year, her tears finally under control, and motioned for Sumuyu to sit down. Soon, a servant placed a bowl and chopsticks in front of Sumuyu. The atmosphere at the table was heavy and suffocating, making conversation nearly impossible. Sumuyu ate in silence, uncomfortably aware of two malicious glares directed at her. One came from the tea-sipping woman across from her. The other came from. When Sumuyu looked up, a handsome young man with a hint of malice in his eyes winked at her flirtatiously. Sumuyu froze for a moment, almost doubting her own perception. No one had introduced him, and she had no idea who the two young people at the table were. Seated at Mrs. Xiu's lower right was a noblewoman of similar age, whose gaze was filled with disdain as she looked at Sumuyu. Sumuyu, right? Mrs. Xiu elegantly wiped her mouth and stared at Sumuyu. Has your mother and father explained the situation to you? Sumuyu lowered her gaze to hide the emotions in her eyes and nodded obediently. Mrs. Xiu continued succinctly, good, now that you understand, after dinner, the butler will take you to the hospital to prepare for artificial insemination. After the meal, Sumuyu was taken to the hospital, where her physical examination took nearly 2 hours. Once her health was confirmed, everything else had already been arranged by the Shi family. Dressed in a hospital gown, Sumuyu lay on the cold operating table. She had known what she would face when she agreed to marry on behalf of Suqing, but when the doctor approached her with a syringe filled with medicine, she couldn't help but call out, "Wait! Miss Su, are you sure you want to back out now?" The butler's sharp gaze was icy. Sumuyu wasn't afraid, but she hesitated. Was she really going to have a child with a stranger? Hadn't she already made up her mind? She had never planned to marry and wanted children, so artificial insemination was her only option. And Shi Xiu Yan wasn't just any man, he was a top-tier handsome genius, one of the best in the world of billionaires. His sperm quality was sure to be excellent, and having him provide half of the genes for her future child seemed quite ideal. Besides, when she eventually left, she would take the child with her, so there shouldn't be any trouble. Sumuyu mentally prepared herself and began to act again, blinking rapidly as tears filled her eyes. What if Shi Xiu Yan wakes up and doesn't want the child? The butler frowned impatiently, motioning for the doctor to wait. He then called Sumuyu's father to explain the situation. Your mother's call. He handed the phone to Sumuyu's ear. The bride price had been paid, the contract signed, and the medical examination done. This was the final step, and the butler didn't want to bother with finding someone else. Dad, I'm so scared, I don't want to do it. Muyu, listen to me. Don't you want to inherit your mother's belongings? Her father coaxed, his voice holding back anger. You know the company's been losing money these past few years. If we don't get the Shi family's support, we'll have to sell some things. So be smart. Sumuyu sneered inwardly. Her father was using her late mother's belongings to threaten her. Seeing that she didn't respond, her father snapped, if you refuse, don't expect to see a single thing from your dead mother. Think carefully. Sumuyu could no longer bear to listen, pushing the phone away from her ear and saying to the butler, I'll do it. The butler snorted and scolded, Miss Su, please keep a good attitude, it's bad for the baby. Sumuyu. After the operation last night, Sumuyu returned to the Shi family. After eating a tasteless meal, she went back to Shi Xiu Yan's bedroom. Originally, Sumuyu had already undergone artificial insemination and was supposed to have a room to herself. However, Mrs. Xiu, believing in the fortune teller's words that Sumuyu's fate would bring luck to Shi Xiu Yan, insisted that she stay with him. It was late into the night. Sumuyu's hand rested gently on her stomach. A new life might already be growing inside her. Creak. The bedroom door opened quietly, and a figure slipped inside. Sumuyu's eyes sharpened in an instant. Who was it? But she didn't move, waiting until she was suddenly embraced from behind, at which point she pretended to struggle in fear. Hey, baby, don't move, let me kiss you properly. The man who had entered was the greasy young man who had flirted with her at the dinner table. Sumuyu felt a wave of disgust and immediately stomped on his foot with all her strength. The man cried out in pain and released her. Sumuyu turned around, her face full of anger and shock. Who are you? Get out, or I'll call for help. I'm Zhao Yi, Shi Xiu Yan's. Zhao Yi smirked, pausing dramatically before finishing, nephew. Sumuyu's pupils flickered. Shi Xiu Yan's nephew. This man was really bold, how dare he? She eyed him warily. What do you want? Zhao Yi shrugged, smiling. I know who you are, Sumuyu. Originally, your sister, Suqing, was supposed to marry Shi Xiu Yan, but she didn't want to. Poor you, a girl with no love from her father or mother, having to take her place. Zhao Yi smiled arrogantly, looking at her with a smug expression. Sumuyu narrowed her eyes. Want to know how I know? Zhao Yi grinned, pulling out a card from his pocket and slowly moving toward her. Sumuyu pretended to be frightened, retreating several steps and grabbing a decorative vase from the side. Don't come any closer. Don't be afraid, this card has 10 million in it. Zhao Yi's tempting words hung in the air. Sumuyu paused for a moment. Seeing her falter, Zhao Yi continued to tempt her. You're going to have a child anyway. What difference does it make whether you have Shi Xiu Yan's baby or mine? Why not cooperate with me? You'll not only get the money, but I'll also make sure you experience the joys of being a woman. Sumuyu's pupils trembled. She had expected Zhao Yi to be planning to take advantage of her like this. Neither of them noticed that, not far away on the bed, Shi Xiu Yan had opened his cold, piercing eyes and was watching them silently. Chapter 4, He woke up. Sumuyu, you're a smart woman. 10 million is enough for you to live well for the rest of your life. If you cooperate with me later, I can offer you more. Zhao Yi, confident that Sumuyu couldn't refuse, smiled smugly, then quietly moved toward her, pulling her into a hug and blowing a flirtatious breath into her ear. When Mrs. Shi was selecting a suitable person for Shi Xiu Yan, they had already secretly investigated Sumuyu's background. Compared to other rich and favored socialites, Sumuyu was the one he thought could be easily coerced and controlled. A warm breath, faintly smelling of alcohol, brushed against Sumuyu's neck, making her skin crawl with disgust. Reacting faster than her brain, Sumuyu raised the flower vase in her hand and smashed it down on Zhao Yi's head. Zhao Yi froze, a trickle of blood running down his forehead. He pressed his hand against the wound, and it was covered in blood. You? He barely got the words out before he collapsed to the ground. The flower vase remained in Sumuyu's hand, the unbroken vase still stained with blood. Sumuyu stared blankly at Zhao Yi on the ground, furrowing her brow. Had she killed him? He was so fragile. On the bed, Shi Xiu Yan, struggling to prop himself up, froze for a moment. He had planned to deal with this pair of dog and cat lovers, but in the end, Sumuyu knocked Zhao Yi out cold. Sumuyu, her sharp hearing catching the movement behind her, was startled. There was no third person in the room, so it had to be. Shi Xiu Yan had woken up. Oh. Sumuyu collapsed into a ball, wrapping her arms around her knees and crying in despair. She curled up like a pitiful woman, her body trembling with each sob. Shi Xiu Yan's deep eyes flashed with a complex expression. In fact, he had already regained consciousness before Zhao Yi arrived. However, it felt like his body wasn't his own, he couldn't move. It was only when Zhao Yi's words provoked him that he managed to regain control over his body, full of rage. Time passed. Sumuyu continued to cry. Shi Xiu Yan's brows furrowed in impatience, waiting a while longer, but she was still sobbing. How much longer are you going to cry? His hoarse, cold voice came from behind. Sumuyu froze, her body stiffening. After a while, she sluggishly turned to look behind her. Her swollen eyes from crying met Shi Xiu Yan's cold, piercing gaze. Sumuyu was momentarily dazed. This man really was so handsome. Seeing her stunned expression, Shi Xiu Yan, impatient, said, "Come here." Shi Xiu Yan, you're really awake, not just a hallucination. Sumuyu pretended to be surprised, wiping the tears from her face, then quickly walked over. Shi Xiu Yan's brows knitted together, his impatience radiating a powerful sense of authority. He was about to ask her what had happened when suddenly, a slap landed on his face, and the hand owner, uncertain, groped his face again. Shi Xiu Yan slapped Sumuyu's hand away, coldly glaring at her. What are you doing? Sumuyu inwardly rolled her eyes. This was for making me suffer when you passed out. But this little exchange reassured her that Shi Xiu Yan had truly woken up. Now, it was time to go back to her act. In the next instant, tears began to fall rapidly. Her hand instinctively moved to her abdomen as she sobbed, "Why didn't you wake up sooner? Why?" Shi Xiu Yan's gaze lingered on her for a few moments before he struggled to move, his limbs stiff as he tried to get out of bed. His legs hit the floor, and for a moment, it seemed like he lost his balance, about to fall. Sumuyu didn't have time to react before Shi Xiu Yan kneeled, barely managing to keep himself from collapsing completely. Shi Xiu Yan's cold eyes were fixed on her. Sumuyu felt her heart tighten under his gaze. After a brief moment, Sumuyu snapped out of her trance and quickly reached out to help him, but he coldly waved her away. My legs. Shi Xiu Yan's eyes were filled with an ominous glint, his awareness of his legs sporadic. His memory seemed to be stuck a year ago, after the car accident. He wasn't sure how much time had passed since then. You had a car accident a year ago. Sumuyu hesitated as she saw his questioning look. The car was totaled. They said the driver died on the spot. She remembered the news reports at the time, how the driver was crushed into a pulp, and the photos from the crash were blurred out. Shi Xiu Yan's face darkened, his eyes flashing with a chilling coldness. The temperature in the room seemed to drop to zero, and the silence was so oppressive that Sumuyu could hear the fluctuations in Shi Xiu Yan's breathing. After a long while, Shi Xiu Yan moved, but only his eyes flickered, staring coldly at Zhao Yi, who was still unconscious on the floor. Sumuyu, seeing this, wanted to explain, but realized Shi Xiu Yan had probably seen everything. So, she stopped herself. Instinctively, she wanted to call for help but feared that it would only lead to more misunderstandings. After a moment's hesitation, she took out her phone and recorded a video of Shi Xiu Yan. Seeing his displeased look, Sumuyu explained while filming, I told Mrs. Shi you were awake, but they didn't believe me. She couldn't afford to be wrongly accused again. Afterward, she hastily went to find someone. This time, she didn't panic and scream, but hurriedly walked away. Just as she left, Shi Xiu Yan, who had been lying on the bed, propped himself up, and after a few moments, collapsed back onto the bed as if his energy had been drained. His sudden wakefulness was as abrupt as his fainting. Outside, only a few street lamps illuminated the road, and the night wind carried a slight chill. Why are you here? Just as she was about to leave through the gate, a cold voice came from behind, startling Sumuyu. She turned around to find the middle-aged, aristocratic woman from the breakfast table. I asked you, why are you here? Sharon's meticulously done makeup looked somewhat strange under her harsh expression. Who are you? Sumuyu had a guess in her mind. Where is my son? Didn't he go upstairs to find you? Sharon scornfully examined Sumuyu, her eyes full of disdain. She had tried calling Zhao Yi, but he hadn't answered. Hearing this, Sumuyu realized that this was Zhao Yi's mother. And just like her son, she had a venomous nature. Her son went upstairs, and the mother was down here keeping watch. Sumuyu's gaze darkened as she turned to find the housekeeper. Sharon had a bad feeling rise in her chest and grabbed Sumuyu's arm impatiently, demanding, Where is my son? How would I know where your son is? Sumuyu shrugged her off and quickly ran down the corridor toward the bamboo forest. Sharon's eyes filled with fury as she glared at Sumuyu's retreating back, then turned and rushed upstairs. After a few twists and turns, Sumuyu finally found the main building but accidentally triggered the alarm system. Beep beep. The alarm blared throughout the villa. Sumuyu was startled, and the housekeeper and staff rushed out in a panic, dressed only in their night clothes. Seeing Sumuyu standing at the villa entrance, their faces instantly darkened. Miss Su, what are you looking for at this hour? The housekeeper asked coldly. Sumuyu could easily hear the hidden displeasure in his tone and immediately responded, Shi Xiu Yan has woken up. Mrs. Shi, who had rushed over, froze when she heard this, a vein twitching on her forehead. The same trick again? She thought. Trying to pull this off a second time. Chapter 5, could it be that she's just teasing her? Someone, get over here and... Mrs. Shi's face was cold as she made up her mind to give Sumuyu a harsh lesson, making sure she knew that some things should never be taken lightly. As expected, they still didn't believe her words. Sumuyu walked straight up to Mrs. Shi and handed her the phone. Mrs. Shi furrowed her brows, then froze, her eyes turning red as she stared at the image on the screen. With a pale face and dry lips, Shi Xiu Yan sat on the floor, his cold eyes staring at the camera. Are ye really woke up, woo-woo? Mrs. Shi cried and laughed, then turned and ran. When Mrs. Shi reached the room and saw Shi Xiu Yan lying on the bed, unconscious, she froze for a moment. If she hadn't seen the video, she would have thought Sumuyu was playing another trick on her. This time, Shi Xiu Yan was lying face down on the bed, making it look like he suddenly collapsed onto it. Are ye, wake up, please wake up and look at me. Mrs. Shi gently pushed him, but Shi Xiu Yan showed no reaction. The housekeeper had already called a doctor, and all the necessary medical equipment was prepared. Half an hour later. Madam, are you sure Mr. Shi woke up? The doctor expressed doubt. The monitoring equipment showed no signs of brain activity in Shi Xiu Yan. It's true, are you really woke up? Mrs. Shi trembled as she showed the doctor the video. The doctor compared the video to the real Shi Xiu Yan, and there was no difference between the two. Because of the long coma, Shi Xiu Yan looked much stronger than before the accident. Could the video be fake? The doctor instinctively said this. He trusted the equipment and scientific evidence more than anything. Mrs. Shi's heart sank as she shot a fierce glare at Sumuyu. Was she still teasing her? She even went so far as to hire someone to Photoshop the video and deceive her. The Shi Xiu Yan in the video seemed perfectly real. Mrs. Shi was increasingly convinced that this was a scheme involving Sumuyu and the Su family behind her. It's not fake, I just filmed it, and it even shows the recording time. Sumuyu calmly explained. Huh? Wait a minute. The doctor, standing to the side, stared at the equipment in surprise. The brainwaves are responding. However, after careful examination, nothing else showed up. The doctor adjusted his glasses, thinking for a moment, then turned to Sumuyu and said, "Say something." "What should I say?" As soon as Sumuyu spoke, the monitor's waveform jumped slightly. There's a response. Mr. Shi is reacting to her voice. The doctor nearly jumped for joy. Shi Xiu Yan, who had been declared brain dead, was not brain dead after all. Quick, go to the bedside and talk to him more. Sumuyu walked to the bedside and said, "Shi Xiu Yan, wake up." On the screen, the waveform became even more pronounced, clearly reacting to Sumuyu's voice. "Mrs. Shi, Mr. Shi is saved. Miss Su's voice is stimulating him," the doctor said excitedly, a medical miracle unfolding before him. Tears streamed down Mrs. Shi's face as she looked at Shi Xiu Yan in bed and then at Sumuyu, her expression complicated. She had misunderstood her. Sumuyu hadn't lied to her. Are you really had woken up? The doctors stayed for a while before leaving. Mrs. Shi's emotions were unstable. After the excitement, she eventually fainted from the emotional strain she'd been carrying over the past days. The housekeeper rushed to care for Mrs. Shi, and the room was left with just Sumuyu. Her gaze fell on the wooden stand nearby, where a decorative vase was placed. When she had come in with Mrs. Shi, she hadn't seen Zhao Yi lying unconscious, and even the blood on the floor and the vase had been wiped clean. It was as if nothing had ever happened. On the other side. Damn, that bitch. Zhao Yi's eyes were filled with venom as he thought about how to torture Sumuyu to vent his anger. HMPH, does that bitch think the money wasn't enough? Shi Xiu Yan's second sister, Sharon, coldly asked as she bandaged Zhao Yi's head. Zhao Yi's expression darkened even more, realizing that his actions must have frightened Sumuyu. After all, she was still a virgin, very innocent in that regard. Thinking about it, Zhao Yi's heart heated up. His uncle had always been aloof and indifferent to him. Yet, he wanted to sleep with his uncle's woman, have her bear his child, and secretly take all of his wealth. The thought alone was thrilling. Especially the innocent and harmless look in Sumuyu's eyes when she faced him. It made him want to bully her even more. Zhao Yi felt the fire inside him rising, and thought, forget it, we can deal with the accounts later, for now. Just then, a servant sneaked into the room and, in a low voice, said, "Second miss, it's bad, young Master Shi is waking up, Sumuyu really did stir his spirit." The servant exaggeratedly repeated the story about Shi Xiu Yan's brain responding to Sumuyu's voice, confirming that Shi Xiu Yan was not brain dead. Sharon and her son's faces darkened. All their plans, they couldn't possibly have been in vain, right? Shi Xiu Yan was still alive. The next day, the Shi family's treatment and attitude towards Sumuyu had changed drastically compared to before. "Madam, do you prefer sweet or savory bird's nest first?" The servant brought over a wooden tray with several bowls of bird's nest. Sumuyu raised an eyebrow and casually replied, "Sweet." Just as she was about to dig in, her phone rang. Before she could pick it up, the servant had already handed it to her. She glanced down and saw that it was a call from Su Qing. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she took the phone, giving the servant an awkward look. The two servants wisely stepped aside. "Mu Yu, are you all right?" As soon as the call connected, Su Qing spoke with a false tone of concern. "I'm fine. Mu Yu, did Mrs. Shi give you any jewelry or maybe a bank card after you joined the Shi family for good luck?" Sumuyu was speechless and remained silent. "No. How could she not? Sumuyu, do you not want to get your mother's inheritance anymore? Suqing probably watched too many rich family dramas and was convinced that Sumuyu had received jewelry from Mrs. Shi but was now pretending she hadn't. What kind of wealthy family was the Shi family? Surely they would have given a gift to the new daughter-in-law, right? Chapter 6, Threats are ineffective. Sumuyu's slender fingers tightened, the pads of her fingers turning pale as she slightly furrowed her brows. Yes, she still wanted to get her mother's belongings back, and the Su family could only use this matter to threaten her. Fine. What do you want? I'll exchange it for my mother's belongings. She agreed without hesitation, starting to negotiate terms with Suqing. After receiving a positive reply, Suqing smiled smugly, confident that as long as she had her mother's belongings, controlling Sumuyu would be a piece of cake. It seemed that she already thought the Shi family was within her grasp. With a scoff, she said, "Let me think about it." Sumuyu couldn't help but smile inwardly, finding it amusing how easily this woman could be fooled. She had only pretended to agree, but Suqing truly thought she could use her mother's belongings to blackmail and threaten her for life. Not a chance. Okay, I don't know what you like, so I'll just take something random. Sumuyu said carelessly. There was nothing in the Shi household that wasn't valuable, and when Suqing thought about how Sumuyu had actually married into such a wealthy family, jealousy flared in her heart. Heh, so you married a vegetable, and now you're showing off? Suqing retorted sharply, intentionally trying to appear indifferent, but it only backfired. Her overly forceful tone made it easy to imagine the frustration on her face, and Sumuyu's mood lifted instantly. Yeah, aside from having money, the Shi family doesn't really have much going for it. Sumuyu raised a hand and lazily yawned. That was actually her honest opinion. She wasn't materialistic, and the wealth of the Shi family meant nothing to her. You? Suqing was so enraged that she couldn't find words to respond. Sigh, I don't know when I'll be able to go out. You know, the Shi family is such a big family with strict rules, Sumuyu said, pretending to be helpless and offering an excuse to placate her. You'd better not try any tricks with me, or you'll never get your mother's belongings. Suqing warned. I know, Sumuyu replied lazily, not wanting to argue, and hung up the phone. Suqing was left fuming, cursing into the dead line. But Suqing did remind her that it was time to get some fresh air. Sumuyu put her phone away, casually took a few more bites of her food, wiped the corners of her mouth, and waved to the two servants who had just left. Where is the old madam? Madam, the old madam is in the living room drinking tea. Without thinking much, Sumuyu went straight to the living room to find Mrs. Shi, only to encounter someone she didn't want to see. Sharon. Of course, she wouldn't be drinking tea alone. Sumuyu chuckled to herself and adjusted her expression before walking over, feeling a bit awkward. Why aren't you with our Yi? What are you doing here? Since Mrs. Shi learned that Shi Xiu Yan did respond to Sumuyu's voice, her attitude towards her had softened significantly. The look of disgust had disappeared, but they still weren't close. After all, Sumuyu was just a tool to her. If she couldn't do something beneficial for Shi Xiu Yan, then there was no use in keeping her around. I want to go out and buy some clothes. I came here in such a hurry, I barely have any clothes. Sumuyu intertwined her fingers nervously, lowered her head slightly, and looked up with innocent eyes, testing her request. Go out. Mrs. Shi frowned, clearly dissatisfied. At this, Sharon snickered and mocked. I bet it's not that you don't have enough clothes, but that you want to go out and have fun, right? As expected, Mrs. Shi's worries deepened upon hearing this. Of course not. I just want to dress more appropriately so as not to affect the Shi family's reputation. Sumuyu quickly denied, then shifted her innocent gaze to Sharon and subtly mocked. I'm not like some people who enjoy looking for fun, and don't need to leave the house to find it. Sharon's face turned from pale to green, her lips tightly pressed together. She stared nervously at Sumuyu, afraid she might say something she shouldn't. If a whole family is collaborating to do something sneaky, that would be even worse. Sumuyu feigned a scared expression and rambled on in a way that only Sharon would understand. What are you insinuating? Mrs. Shi's tone grew more severe. I saw it on TV, they were talking about families with dirty hands. Sumuyu blinked her innocent eyes, glancing back and forth between Sharon and Mrs. Shi. Sharon clenched her fists, trembling slightly, feeling guilty and afraid to continue mocking Sumuyu. She quickly forced a smile. Har har har, it's just TV, not everything is true. She stood up and walked over to Sumuyu, then turned to Mrs. Shi and suggested, "Since it concerns the Shi family's reputation, how about I take her to buy clothes?" Mrs. Shi was somewhat reassured. At least with Shirong around, she could make sure Sumuyu didn't do anything inappropriate while out. She nodded. "All right, you teach her if she doesn't understand." Although Sumuyu didn't want to go out with Shirong, she pretended to be obedient and agreed, "Thank you so much." Once they left the Shi residence, Shirong's attitude changed completely. With no one else around, she harshly warned, "I advise you not to say anything unnecessary. I was just talking about a TV show." "Don't be too sensitive," Sumuyu said with a slight smile, casually shrugging her shoulders, acting like she didn't know anything. Shirong, her anger bubbling over with no outlet, had a flushed face and, in a fit of rage, threatened, "If you dare say something you shouldn't, I'll make sure you're kicked out of the Shi family." Did she have that power? Sumuyu wasn't worried. She was the Shi family's savior right now. Whether or not Shi Xiu Yan woke up depended on her, and who would dare kick her out? Yes, Sumuyu replied nonchalantly, focusing on picking out clothes. Seeing that her threats had no effect, Shirong seethed in frustration, eager to find another way to deal with Sumuyu and teach her a lesson. Sumuyu tried on a few clothes but didn't find anything she liked. Just as she was about to go to another store, the salesperson called out to her. "Hey, miss, the clothes you just tried on are ruined. You need to pay for it." "Ruined?" Sumuyu raised an eyebrow, asking curiously. How could that be? If it had been ruined, she would have noticed. "Really, come take a look." The salesperson led her over, pointing to a specific item where the side seam had torn. "I never tried this on," Sumuyu directly pointed out the issue and insisted on seeing the surveillance footage. However, the clothes were in the changing room, and the surveillance could only show that Sumuyu entered the fitting room, but not who tried on what. After reviewing the footage and seeing the so-called evidence, the salesperson became more confident. "Who else could it be but you? Are you trying to shirk responsibility?" She deliberately raised her voice, shouting loudly enough to attract attention. Chapter 7 Successful Counterattack. "Since you damaged our clothes, you have to pay for it." The salesperson seemed to be sure that Sumuyu would default on her debt, grabbed her arm, and shouted aggressively. "Look at you, you are really from the countryside, you can even wear clothes for others." Shirong smiled secretly, but he blamed her severely, which further confirmed Sumuyu's crime. Passers-by talked about it and began to point fingers at Sumuyu. "He looks like a decent person, but I didn't expect him to be this kind of person. Why do you come to a luxury store when you have no money? Isn't this vanity?" Sumuyu finally understood that this was Shirong's trick, creating some scandals for her so that Shirong could go back and tell Mrs. Shi. However, although the trick was very low-end, Shirong's vicious mind had to be guarded against. In addition to the incident with Zhao Yi, Sumuyu saw clearly that there was no good person in that family. "What are you still daydreaming about? Hurry up and pay me back." The salesperson pushed Sumuyu and said angrily. The salesperson used a lot of strength and wanted to push Sumuyu to the ground to embarrass her, but she didn't expect that she didn't move at all. Sumuyu stood steadily, with her hands clasped in front of her chest, and her eyes glanced at everyone, and finally fell on Shirong. The cold eyes made Shirong's heart tremble, and he was actually scared. How could this girl have such eyes? "I didn't wear your clothes to pieces, why do you want me to compensate?" Sumuyu asked back with confidence, and stepped forward to pick up the clothes. The salesperson sneered, "You went to the fitting room alone, who else could it be if not you? Could it be broken by itself?" "You are really right, it was broken to begin with," Sumuyu replied calmly. Everyone was stunned. What was she talking about? She held up the dress and accurately said its brand, time, and even the name of the designer. Everyone was silent after hearing this, and they couldn't refute anything for a while. The hollow waist is the design of this dress, which modifies the waistline. If you don't believe it, you can check it on the official website. After that, Sumuyu put the dress back, turned around gracefully, and smiled at the salesperson, but her eyes were not friendly, but full of coldness. Her contrast made the salesperson feel cold, and the salesperson couldn't help but take 2 steps back. "But you, as a salesperson, don't know, but slander the customer. I don't know how your company is managed." The passers-by believed Sumuyu's words, and the conversation turned around, and all the aggression was directed at the salesperson. "Even this can be wrong, what a joke, I won't dare to come here to buy things in the future." Being misunderstood for no reason, anyone would be furious. If it were me, I would definitely complain. It's cleared. I will never buy this brand again. It's obvious that the management is not good. Sharon gritted his teeth and stared at Sumuyu with injustice. She bribed the salesperson in advance, wanting to make Sumuyu look bad, but it backfired and made Sumuyu the center of attention. How could this country girl know so much? After completing her mission, Sumuyu knew that this was all Sharon's doing, so she didn't argue with the salesperson and turned away. I was scared to death, luckily I just secretly read the introduction. Otherwise, I would be finished. Sumuyu patted his chest and complained with a lingering fear. Sharon suddenly realized and believed Sumuyu's words. After all, Sumuyu was from the countryside. How could a country girl like her understand these things? Sumuyu maintained superficial harmony with everyone along the way, and finally returned to the Shi family. Sumuyu bought a lot of things. Mrs. Shi raised her eyes and saw her coming in with a lot of bags, and wrinkled her nose slightly. Sumuyu walked directly to her, took things out of the gift bag and introduced them. This is the ginseng I bought for you. You can ask the servants to make soup. I heard it's good for your health. This is. In the end, most of the things she bought were for Mrs. Shi, and she only bought 2 clothes for herself. Mrs. Shi's eyes eased a lot, and she also praised Sumuyu a little more. Sumuyu was quite sensible. Okay, just leave it there. Mrs. Shi's favor towards Sumuyu had already improved, but Sharon came out to interfere at this time. Oh, I told you not to buy so much. Sister-in-law is not such a snobbish person. Sharon smiled. On the surface, she was joking, but in fact, she was implying that Sumuyu had bad intentions. After being provoked by her, Mrs. Shi's smile froze, and she felt a little alienated from Sumuyu. Such a scheming woman, who knows what problems will arise in the future. Sumuyu. Sharon's 2 words made her efforts today go to waste. At night, Sumuyu, who was tired all day, returned to the room and saw Shi Xiu Yan lying on the bed. He was still as quiet as ever. Sumuyu sat by the bed and looked at him curiously. Are you sleeping? She touched his fingers, and he did not respond. Shi Xiu Yan? Are you sure you are not pretending to sleep? Sumuyu suddenly had an idea and even used her fingers to pull his eyelids, but found nothing wrong, and was sure that he was not awake. Sumuyu was eager to find someone to complain to, so she told him what happened today and made a final summary. Your family is really troublesome, scheming against each other all day long. Sumuyu, who was talking excitedly, did not notice that Shi Xiu Yan's fingers moved. Her voice stimulated him, and he slowly woke up and heard what she had just said. After she was tired of talking, Sumuyu fell asleep next to him without even covering her with a quilt. When she calmed down, Shi Xiu Yan opened his eyes and looked at the people around him, feeling an inexplicable feeling in his heart. He had no idea about this marriage, and he had an extra wife inexplicably. Hum. Sumuyu hummed in his sleep. Shi Xiu Yan subconsciously closed his eyes, and when he heard the even breathing of the people around him, he realized that she was just talking in her sleep, and then he opened his eyes again. So annoying. Sumuyu turned around and hugged the things around him habitually, with his hands and feet on Shi Xiu Yan's body. Shi Xiu Yan. Does this woman really know that he is a vegetative person who needs care? I don't want to have children. Everyone in your family bullies me. She mumbled indistinctly, her warm breath sprinkled on his neck, tickling him. She said she didn't want to have children, but she hugged him so tightly. Shi Xiu Yan frowned, a hint of dissatisfaction flashed in his black pupils, and he was very disgusted with this woman who was forced to come. He was not used to being so close to someone, and tried to move her hands and feet away, wanting to get up and leave. Click. The sound of the bedroom door opening suddenly sounded, and Shi Xiu Yan's sharp eye swept towards the door, his eyes seemed to be quenched with ice. Who would take the initiative to enter this room? Chapter 8. The Shi family is haunted. Someone actually broke into the bedroom at night, and a trace of cruelty flashed across Shi Xiu Yan's deep eyes like a deep pool. Zhao Yi hadn't learned the lesson he deserved last time, and he came to the door again. Zhao Yi was completely unaware of Shi Xiu Yan's awakening. He quietly opened the door and poked his head in to check the situation inside. There were 2 figures on the bed. Sumuyu hugged Shi Xiu Yan in the quilt and slept very soundly. Har har, what's the point of hugging a vegetative person tightly? Why not let your brother take good care of you? Zhao Yi rubbed his hands and said with a smile, walking towards the bed. Suddenly someone patted his shoulder gently. Zhao Yi was startled and turned his head to look. He said impatiently, "Damn, who is it?" As soon as he turned around, he saw Shi Xiu Yan staring at him with black eyes, domineering. You, why are you here?" That person on the bed." Zhao Yi was stunned. He looked at the two figures on the bed stiffly, and his mind was blank. "I want to ask you why you are here," Shi Xiu Yan said coldly with a sharp look in his eyes. "I know, it must be Sumuyu. She's looking for another man." Zhao Yi convinced himself, cold sweat on his forehead, and he pulled up the corners of his mouth to smile. "Uncle, I'll call someone to catch the adulterer." "You wait." After saying that, he stumbled out. Zhao Yi ran out of the room and finally found two servants passing by. He grabbed one of them by the hand and said anxiously, "Shi Xiu Yan is awake." "What?" The servant hurried to the room to see if Shi Xiu Yan was really awake. It was because of Sumuyu's misunderstanding that Mrs. Shi was very angry. If she reported it without confirming the situation, everyone would be in trouble. The servant opened the door of the room and found that it was silent inside, with only the slight sound of Sumuyu snoring. The servants looked at each other, turned around and looked at Zhao Yi, frowning to express confusion. How is this possible?" Zhao Yi opened his eyes wide and looked around the room in disbelief, but he didn't see the third person. The servant gently closed the door and shook his head at Zhao Yi. "How did you know?" I might have heard his voice, he. Of course, he couldn't reveal that he had entered Shi Xiu Yan's room, so he just found an excuse to cover it up. After the servant left, Zhao Yi didn't believe it and sneaked into the room again. There were still two people on the bed. Shi Xiu Yan and Sumuyu were both sleeping, and there was nothing wrong. Zhao Yi was confused and looked around, muttering to himself, "This is impossible." Suddenly, the wind blew, and the thin curtains fluttered in the wind. He turned his head and looked over. "Are you looking for me?" a voice outside the window asked faintly. Zhao Yi's face turned pale, and he stood there stiffly, stammering, Who's there?" "This is the second floor, how could there be someone outside the window?" A shadow flashed outside the window, and a gloomy voice dragged out, saying sadly, "I need someone to accompany me, how about you?" Zhao Yi was so scared that he couldn't scream, and he fled the room. After finally running to the corner, he ran into a servant. He opened his mouth in fear and said with difficulty, "Ghost. There is a ghost." Before the servant could speak, Zhao Yi's eyes rolled back and he fainted, and fell to the ground with a thump. In the room, Shi Xiu Yan got up from the bed and took back the mobile phone on the windowsill. Just some processed recordings could scare Zhao Yi like this. With this little courage, how could he dare to do bad things? Shi Xiu Yan sneered, "It seems that the family has changed a lot during his coma. Give it back to me." Sumuyu was talking in his sleep angrily, and he turned over in bed, smacking his lips, but he was not woken up. He quietly looked at the strange woman sleeping in his bed. The moonlight fell on him, and his dark pupils were quiet and mysterious, making people unpredictable. The next day, Sumuyu woke up after a good sleep, and Shi Xiu Yan beside her was still motionless as always. After doing her own thing, Sumuyu took a few pieces of jade to meet Su Qing. Su Qing looked at Sumuyu with contempt, and saw that she really had no wealth and glory, and she was a little convinced in her heart. Sumuyu ignored her scrutiny, got straight to the point, took out the jade jewelry and put it on the table. Su Qing's eyes lit up, and she reached out to take it. When she was about to touch it, Sumuyu's hand pressed on the box. She raised her eyes and asked sternly, "What do you mean? Where is the thing I want?" Sumuyu asked back. "One thing for another, so that Su Qing won't regret and cause a lot of trouble." Su Qing snorted coldly and took out a book from her bag. The book looked very old, and there were many damaged places on the cover. It was conceivable that the Su family didn't keep it well, and there might be termites in it. "Here." Sumuyu let go of her hand and took the book, with a moving soft light in her eyes. "This is my mother's relic." Su Qing also couldn't wait to grab the jewelry box, took out the jade inside and carefully examined it, her eyes full of greed. "Why is there only one book?" Sumuyu put away the book and asked. Su Qing's eyes were full of jade, raised one corner of her mouth, pretended to be innocent and perfunctory. "You only took a few pieces of jewelry, isn't it fair?" If she returned all of them to Sumuyu at once, how could she get benefits from Sumuyu? Sumuyu didn't expect her to be like this, and held back her emotions. After appreciating the jadeite, Su Qing put it into her bag and casually mentioned, Qingming and I are getting engaged. Very good, very well matched. Su Muyu replied in a flat tone. Of course, I also have to thank my sister for withdrawing. Su Qing curled her lips smugly, not knowing that Su Muyu was thinking that the scum man and the scum woman were a match made in heaven. But, there are still places where I need my sister's help. The engagement party will cost a lot of money. Su Muyu. She couldn't help but sigh that Su Qing was thick-skinned enough, she was simply a shameless beggar. After verbally perfunctorily responding to Su Qing, Su Muyu left the cafe and walked alone on the road. Her hand covered the bag until her palm was warm. When she thought that it contained her mother's relics, she felt a little depressed. Be careful. A truck suddenly lost control and crashed towards Su Muyu. Su Muyu heard the voice and looked up suddenly, but she didn't have time to dodge. Just when the truck was close, a strong hand grabbed her slender arm and pulled her to the side of the road. Seeing who it was, Su Muyu was surprised and said, Zhang Lin. Chapter 9 3 Rules. Why are you distracted so much? Zhang Lin frowned and asked seriously. If he hadn't happened to pass by, Su Muyu would have been seriously injured. It was not her style to be so careless. I'm fine. Su Muyu's eyes evaded. It was obvious that she was not fine, but she didn't want to say more. Zhang Lin and Su Muyu were in the same organization. When performing tasks, he rarely saw her so absent-minded. Fearing that she had encountered some trouble, Zhang Lin frowned even deeper. You are still polite to me. Zhang Lin's voice was full of energy and sounded steady and reliable. He took care of Su Muyu a lot in the organization. Su Muyu trusted him and finally compromised and told him about her own affairs. So it's this kind of thing. I can help you investigate your mother's industry and tell you if there is any news. Zhang Lin is the owner of a well-known high-end chain restaurant with a wide network of contacts. With his help, Su Muyu felt a little more at ease. The two said goodbye after reminiscing about the past. When she got home, a servant suddenly told Su Muyu that someone was looking for her outside the door. When she arrived at the door, she found that it was Su Qing. She was holding a few jade ornaments in her hand. She was so angry that her face turned red. She pointed at Su Muyu and cursed. Su Muyu. You bitch. You deliberately used fake goods to deceive me. Su Qing had just taken the jade back, and her vanity swelled. She couldn't wait to wear it on her body, and she wanted to show off everywhere. As a result, it was found to be a fake within a few hours of being prestige. She didn't believe that the things of the Shi family could be fake. It must be that the other party didn't know the goods. The two argued and even had a fight. Su Qing took it for identification, and found that the jade was actually fake. You shameless bitch. How dare you deceive me? You are not a good thing just like your cheap mother. This was at the Shi family. Su Muyu deliberately didn't fight back. Instead, her eyes were red and she looked at Su Qing innocently. How is this possible? I don't know how this happened. You wronged me. Wronged? You dare to say you are wronged. You did it on purpose. You dare to make me look bad, don't even think about getting off easy. Su Qing sneered and threw the jadeite at Su Muyu angrily. The jadeite was shattered all over the floor, making a mess. Su Muyu turned his head away, squinted his eyes, and silently endured it. The huge noise attracted the attention of Mrs. Shi, who came over and saw the farce. The audience came, Su Muyu's eyes were red, tears in his eyes, and he sobbed softly, I don't know what's going on. You can beat me or scold me, but don't make trouble here, we can solve it ourselves. Su Qing lost face and was furious at this time. She rushed forward and grabbed Su Muyu's hair, why are you pretending with me? Tell me the truth. Otherwise, I will beat you, you bitch. Stop it. Mrs. Shi said with full majesty. Su Qing couldn't calm down her anger, her breathing was rapid, and she shook off Su Muyu for Mrs. Shi's sake. Su Muyu staggered a few steps, her body trembling slightly, as if she was trying to hold back her sobs and suffered a lot of grievances. What's going on? Mrs. Shi looked grim and asked coldly. Su Qing said mockingly, your daughter-in-law used fake jade to deceive me, I'm here to settle the score. I didn't. Su Muyu suppressed her tears and innocently defended herself. No matter what the truth was, it was embarrassing to make trouble in front of the Shi family's door. Mrs. Shi naturally took advantage of her family and asked someone to drive Su Qing away without saying a word. Don't let any inexplicable people in the future. Su Qing was dragged away by the security guard, still struggling hard, cursing Sumuyu with a hideous face. Just wait. I'll make you pay. Don't even think about taking back what you want. Sumuyu said nothing, just leaned sideways, tidying up her messy hair, like a bullied kitten. After driving Su Qing away, Madame Shi's stern eyes fell on Sumuyu. I don't care what the matter is, your every move now is related to the Shi family, don't do such embarrassing things again. Sumuyu nodded weakly, I know, it's all my fault, I'm really sorry. Seeing that she was indeed bullied and had a good attitude of admitting her mistakes, Madame Shi sighed helplessly and waved her hand, indicating that she forgave her. Hurry up and clean up, what do you look like now? Sumuyu returned to the room naturally, and was secretly happy when Su Qing left in a mess, but was surprised to find that Shi Xiu Yan was awake. And he was still sitting by the bed, so he could move freely. Sumuyu opened her mouth and subconsciously reached for her phone. She was about to record a video, but was met with Shi Xiu Yan's cold gaze. Don't make a sound. His angular face seemed to be frozen and cold, and his good-looking features could not even smile. He was even colder than when he was a vegetable. But Sumuyu wanted to say something else, but when he met Shi Xiu Yan's gaze, he closed his mouth again, acting like a frightened bird. Zhao Yi was ready to make a move, and Shi Xiu Yan didn't want to reveal that he had woken up, so as to maintain the advantage of observing in the dark. I'll keep my awakening secret for the time being. I'll tell you when I think the time is right. Seeing that she seemed to be frightened by him, Shi Xiu Yan softened his tone and calmly made 3 rules with Sumuyu. For now, you just need to do everything as usual and don't arouse other people's suspicion. Sumuyu didn't understand his intentions, and continued to play dumb, tilting her head, twisting her fingers together, raising her slightly red eyes to observe him, and tentatively speaking. But Madam asked me to keep an eye on your physical condition. If you wake up, you must tell her, otherwise she will. At this point, she pursed her lips again and lowered her head in silence. Shi Xiu Yan swept her messy hair and it was not difficult to see that she had just been bullied. Although he had no feelings for her, Shi Xiu Yan was still very upset that his wife in name was bullied. I owe you, and I will definitely compensate you in the future. He promised. Whether it was the grievances she suffered in the Shi family or the forced acceptance of artificial insemination, he would compensate her. At this point, Sumuyu knew that she had no right to refuse, and it was enough to take the opportunity to win Shi Xiu Yan's sympathy. I know, I will listen to you. There were footsteps outside the door. Sumuyu and Shi Xiu Yan subconsciously looked at each other, and there was a little more tacit understanding between them. Sumuyu opened the door in advance and went out. Sure enough, a servant came to find her, saying that Sharon sent something to her and needed her to go downstairs to take a look. I see. Go do other things first. I've already cleaned up the room. Yes. Sumuyu fixed her hair and went downstairs to see what Sharon was up to. Chapter 10: A Cold and Heartless Family. When she came downstairs, Sumuyu saw a Buddha statue on the table at a glance. She raised her eyebrows slightly, and her eyes were stained with a playful look. What is Sharon doing? This is a gift from me. I heard that your place seems to be not very clean recently. Sharon lowered his voice slightly nervously and said seriously. Sumuyu blinked curiously and asked, pretending to be ignorant, what is not very clean? My son said it's haunted. Sharon deliberately exaggerated the weird atmosphere, but his eyes were always observing Sumuyu's every move. Haunted. Thinking that Shi Xiu Yan had woken up, Sumuyu had guessed 80% of it. Zhao Yi was really unwilling to give up and sneaked in again. Is it true? So scary. Sumuyu covered her mouth with her hand, pretending to be shocked, frowning, showing a bit of fear. Sharon seemed to believe her reaction, retracted his scrutinizing expression, and pointed to the Buddha statue on the table. So, I went to ask for this Buddha statue to suppress some evil spirits for you. Whether it is real or not, it is better than nothing. Sumuyu looked at the Buddha statue, lowered his eyes slightly to hide the doubt in his eyes, just smiled indifferently, and accepted it politely. Thank you for your kindness. By the way, how is Yang? How is his condition? Sharon pretended to care. Sumuyu did not hesitate at all, and said helplessly, still no movement. Sharon's mental state relaxed, and his shoulders drooped slightly. This small action was seen by Sumuyu. This Buddha statue will bless you. Remember to put it at the bedside, so that the effect will be better. Sumuyu expressed her gratitude again, and finally sent Shirong away after some politeness. She picked up the Buddha statue and looked at it carefully, but did not find any video or recording equipment. She frowned and looked more carefully. She did not believe that there was no problem. Shirong was a weasel paying New Year's greetings to the chicken, so she had to be on guard. Suddenly, Sumuyu raised her eyebrows, and after changing her mind, she suddenly understood. It's the smell. She sneered, thinking of what Shirong had just said. It will be better to put it at the bedside, because the volatile effect of the poison gas will have a better effect on them. Sumuyu pretended to be nothing, and quietly disposed of the Buddha statue. At night, the heavy rain came suddenly, with the sound of rain and the roar of the wind. Sumuyu frowned, her fingers trembled restlessly, and she unconsciously grasped the bed sheet, with cold sweat on her forehead. Boom! A thunderbolt struck, and Sumuyu woke up from her nightmare. She panted and sat up. There were lightning flashes outside the window from time to time, and the shadows of the trees shone into the room, and the black shadows kept swaying. Sumuyu became more and more afraid and could not fall asleep. Turning her head to look at Shi Xiu Yan, she gritted her teeth, made up her mind, lifted his quilt and got in. Anyway, you are a vegetable, it's not that easy to wake up, just do me a favor. Sumuyu comforted herself, feeling a little more at ease, and snuggled up to Shi Xiu Yan to continue sleeping. Little did she know that Shi Xiu Yan heard her words clearly, and it shocked him. Is this how this woman treats him as a tool? Sumuyu's breathing gradually became even, and her warm breath sprinkled on his neck. Shi Xiu Yan looked sideways. Unlike the normal social distance, he could even see the hair on her face when he looked at her so closely. He could kiss her forehead as long as he got a little closer. Shi Xiu Yan sighed in his heart and looked at her quietly for a moment. The fever body beside him suddenly left, and Shi Xiu Yan felt empty, but he closed his eyes and ignored it. The next day, Sumuyu woke up and found herself sleeping on the floor with only a thin blanket on her. You? She dared to be angry but not to say anything. Although it was wrong for her to get into the bed, did Shi Xiu Yan still have any conscience? It was so cold yesterday, and he actually threw her on the floor. Before she could speak, Sumuyu sneezed, sniffed her nose, and felt her head a little heavy. It seemed that she had a cold. When she went downstairs to drink water, Mrs. Shi noticed that she was sneezing and her face darkened. You have a cold. Sumuyu told the truth and nodded. Madame Shi put down the water cup in her hand and said seriously, if you have a cold, you can't sleep in the same bed with a Yang, you will infect him. Sumuyu was a little stunned, but Madame Shi continued to talk. Ask the doctor to get you some medicine, and sleep in a separate room from a Yang until you recover from your cold. Sumuyu. Their mother and son are equally cold and ruthless. Restaurant. After all, my daughter has been married to the Shi family for a while, so it's better to hand over the betrothal gift as soon as possible. Su's father smiled ingratiatingly and said to Zhao Yi, who was sitting opposite with a look of disdain. Zhao Yi was responsible for the handover of the Shi family's financial resources and the cooperation between the two families. Zhao Yi didn't want to come after receiving Su's father's invitation, and deliberately showed his face to Su's father. But he thought about it, isn't this a good opportunity to get Sumuyu? Sumuyu didn't sleep with Shi Xiu Yan, so what's the point of marrying here? Zhao Yi sneered. Father Su was confused. How could Shi Xiu Yan, a vegetative man, have sex with him? At least we have to confirm our relationship with the Shi family to make it count, right? Zhao Yi hinted, his eyes full of evil, and his mouth curled up. Father Su received his eyes, suddenly realized, and nodded with a big laugh. Of course. Sumuyu received a call from Father Su and asked him coldly what was going on. Father Su was angry and dissatisfied because he didn't get respect from Sumuyu. What's your attitude? It seems that you don't want your mother's relics. Just say it directly if you have anything to say. Sumuyu was too lazy to be polite with him. Father Su snorted coldly and told her the place he had booked, asking her to come and get the relics. Without finding a better excuse, Sumuyu chuckled sarcastically. Okay. Knowing that it was a hongmen banquet, she agreed directly. She wanted to go over and see what he was going to do. In the evening, Sumuyu arrived at the restaurant that Su's father mentioned, but she didn't see him. Instead, she received a call from him. I have something to do and will arrive later. You can order first. I'll pay the bill. Su's father chose a high-end restaurant, and there was no cheap food. Sumuyu ordered a few dishes and enjoyed them without hesitation. After a while, Sumuyu suddenly found that her body had a slight fever. She originally thought it was just a fever caused by a cold, until this feeling continued to magnify and began to confuse her consciousness. Did they drug me? Sumuyu frowned and picked up the phone to call Zhang Lin for help. After telling Zhang Lin her location, Sumuyu called Su Qing again. Would you like to have dinner? Chapter 11, Substituting One Thing for Another. Su Qing scolded Sumuyu for daring to come to her, as the last time the fake jadeite incident had not been settled. Sumuyu pretended to be humble and took the initiative to admit his mistake. I didn't recognize it was fake either. I'll treat you to a meal to make amends. I will definitely distinguish the real from the fake in the future. Stop it. You treat me to a meal and you want me to forgive you. Originally, she wanted to scold Sumuyu a few more times to vent her anger, but when she heard the name of the restaurant and found out that it was a high-end restaurant, Su Qing softened her attitude and came over after putting on makeup. She came with the attitude of a lady, and did not forget to take a few more photos, as if she was the one who treated the guests. You are sensible. You know to apologize to me. Su Qing sat down, picked up the menu, and ordered the most expensive dish without hesitation. It's all my fault. Just order a few more dishes. It's up to you. Sumuyu couldn't help laughing. Anyway, the bill was paid by Su's father, so the father and daughter could be considered to have kept the money within the family. The phone vibrated. Sumuyu opened it and saw that it was from Zhang Lin. At the door. Concise and to the point. Sumuyu put away the phone, stood up and prepared to leave. I have to go back first, otherwise Madame Shi will be angry and won't send me anything. Su Qing snorted to show that she knew, and didn't even look up at her. Enjoy it slowly. Sumuyu smiled. Although she didn't know what Su's father prepared for her, she sent it to Su Qing as it was. Sumuyu got in the car, and Zhang Lin worriedly asked, Are you okay? She shook her head, but her breathing was very unsteady. She held her forehead and asked him to take her back. Can you protect yourself in the Shi family? Zhang Lin frowned, his eyes focused on the road, his eyes full of worry. Both the Shi family and the Su family are not good for Sumuyu. Her situation is very dangerous and she must be cautious. Don't worry, don't you know me? Sumuyu reluctantly pulled the corner of her mouth and smiled weakly. Today, she was not in a clear mind and had no awareness of the dishes cooked in the restaurant. At the same time, Su Qing was enjoying the gift prepared by Su's father. Su's father told the kitchen to drug all the dishes cooked on this table, and when the person sitting at that table was not conscious, someone would take her away. The people he arranged didn't know what Sumuyu looked like, but only recognized that position. When Su Qing began to sit unsteadily and swayed left and right, the people Su's father found went over to take Su Qing away and sent her to Zhao Yi's room. Back at the Shi family villa, Sumuyu relied on her strong willpower and pretended to be fine to take a cold shower. She rubbed her face to keep herself awake. Fortunately, I slept in a separate room from Shi Xiu Yan. Sumuyu realized it later and felt a little fortunate. If she shared a room with him, she was afraid that she would want to peel him. It would be fine if he hadn't woken up, but he was awake now. I just got into his bed, but he threw me off the bed. If I wanted to take off his clothes, I was afraid he would skin me alive. In the middle of the night, Sumuyu couldn't sleep. She guessed that the medicine given by Su's father had side effects, which made her nerves very excited and she couldn't sleep at all. Sumuyu went downstairs without turning on the light, and fumbled to find the refrigerator to get ice cubes. Clang! Suddenly, there was a sound of something falling from the coffee table. Sumuyu walked over lightly, trying to figure out what was going on. But she saw a figure there. Her first reaction was that it was Zhao Yi. Sumuyu shouted at the top of her voice, trying to attract Madame Shi to let her take a good look at what kind of person Zhao Yi was. There's a thief. The other party quickly covered her mouth to prevent her from making a sound. This smell is wrong. Sumuyu frowned and smelled Shi Xiu Yan's scent on the other person, realizing that she had recognized the wrong person. Shi, it's me. Shi Xiu Yan covered her mouth from behind, and his palm clearly felt the softness of her lips. The two were very close, and his somewhat urgent breathing was just above her head. Sumuyu's back could really feel the rise and fall of his chest. Sumuyu guessed that he had sneaked out, but his body had just recovered and his coordination was not very good, so he accidentally knocked things down. She nodded vigorously, and Shi Xiu Yan let go of her hand. They thought they were fine, but they heard hurried footsteps. Shi Xiu Yan secretly thought it was not good, and hid behind the sofa, and the light was turned on at this time. The servant saw only Sumuyu and asked anxiously, "Where is the thief?" I saw it wrong. I may be confused because of sleep. I can't tell whether it is a dream or not. Sumuyu ruffled her hair and said lightly, pretending to yawn. The servant was speechless for a moment. Was there really something dirty in this house? Sorry, I'll go back with a bottle of drink. You go to rest. Sumuyu sent the servant away. After the servant left, Shi Xiu Yan stood up and said in a light tone, "Thank you." "Nothing, what are you doing outside?" Sumuyu asked casually, and just after she said it, she realized that she was talking too much, and added seamlessly, "If there is anything, I can help you." What is there for a vegetative person who has just recovered to be so anxious that he has to sneak out? Shi Xiu Yan looked at her steadily, his deep black pupils were unfathomable, and his mouth was pursed coldly, so that she couldn't tell what he meant. "It's okay, I can handle it myself." Finally, he just said it calmly and went back to the room. The next day, Su Qing woke up and found herself in the hotel room, with all kinds of marks on her body. "Oh!" she screamed subconsciously. Zhao Yi was woken up by her, got up in a daze, and asked her what happened. "Who are you? What's wrong with you? Why am I here?" Su Qing asked a series of questions, panting with anger, and Zhao Yi stared at her heaving chest with burning eyes. "You dare to look?" Su Qing grabbed the sheets and wrapped herself tightly, glaring at him. Zhao Yi smiled, took her into his arms, and comforted her. "I am Shi Xiu Yan's nephew, I am not a bad person." Su Qing, who was still struggling, listened to this and calmed down a little, and her tone softened a little. "You are from the Shi family. What's going on?" Zhao Yi didn't know why it was Su Qing who was sent over in the end, not Sumuyu, but he didn't care anyway, so he accepted it all. "Why not take advantage of a beauty who came to your doorstep? I'm about to get engaged, how can I face people?" Su Qing cried, angry and annoyed, and couldn't figure out the relationship for a while. Shi Xiu Yan is a useless person. Sooner or later, the property of the Shi family will be mine. Being my woman will have many benefits. Why are you in such a hurry? This is not completely unreasonable, but Su Qing still finds it difficult to accept such a thing that happened suddenly. What's more, it was Su's father who caused it. Chapter 12 Achieving Cooperation. As long as we have a common enemy, can't we cooperate? Zhao Yi softened his tone and comforted Su Qing, and the tone at the end of the sentence had a bit of lingering meaning. Su Qing felt wronged. Why should she bear this kind of thing for Sumuyu? Help me deal with Sumuyu. When I get the Shi family's property, I won't treat you badly. Zhao Yi tentatively took Su Qing into his arms. This time she didn't dodge, which was considered tacit consent. When Su's father learned that it was Su Qing, not Sumuyu, who was sent to Zhao Yi, he was so angry that he almost fainted. Sumuyu actually dared to plot against Su Qing, causing him to lose both his wife and his army. Fortunately, Zhao Yi didn't dislike Su Qing, so Su's father had to use the same trick to persuade Su Qing. There is no loss for you. Won't we hold the Shi family's property more firmly in the future? Su's father analyzed it to her, tempting her not to give up this opportunity. Zhao Yi is not a vegetable like Shi Xiu Yan. Relying on Zhao Yi is much better than pinning hopes on Sumuyu. But, what about brother Qingming? Su Qing still felt that she was sorry for Fang Qingming, but she couldn't bear to give up this great opportunity to climb up the ladder, and she was entangled for a while. Su's father was very disappointed and sighed, "What are you afraid of? If you don't tell me and I don't tell him, how can he know?" Zhao Yi also agreed to hide Fang Qingming, and the three of them reached a consensus. While negotiating with Su's father, Zhao Yi received a call from Sharon. Recently, Jin Hong seems to have made some moves. Sharon said anxiously. Jin Hong is Shi Xiu Yan's assistant. He has been out of the public eye for a long time since Shi Xiu Yan's accident. Recently, he has become active again. Sharon was afraid that things would change, so he was anxious to discuss countermeasures with Zhao Yi. However, Zhao Yi had just received the support of Su's father and Su Qing, and was determined to take over the Shi family's property, and didn't care about Jin Hong at all. He is just a little assistant, and Shi Xiu Yan is still a useless person. No matter how Jin Hong jumps around, what can he achieve? Zhao Yi sneered and asked back in a loud voice. Hearing his son's confident speech, Sharon's doubts were also reduced a lot. That's good. Be careful. Zhao Yi returned to the Shi family and reported to Mrs. Shi during dinner as usual. The cooperation with the Su family went smoothly, and everything has been handed over. Zhao Yi looked at Su Muyu and smiled gently, "It's all thanks to my aunt." Su Muyu was disgusted by his meaningful eyes, and she didn't even want to raise her eyelids, but just picked up the dishes silently. She smiled lightly and said politely, "How can I help? But I also want to study hard. I wonder if you can give me a chance to join the company." Su Muyu looked up and looked at Mrs. Shi with expectant eyes. "You want to work?" Mrs. Shi was curious. She didn't expect her to have such thoughts. Su Muyu nodded, pursed her lips tightly, made a nervous expression, and asked again, "Is it okay? I'll just follow and learn. I'm willing to endure hardships." It was rare for her to have this thought, and Mrs. Shi nodded in agreement. "But there is one condition. You can't go in as Ian's wife. You need to hide your identity," Mrs. Shi added with full of majesty. Su Muyu readily agreed and said obediently, "I am satisfied to be able to help. I don't need any privileges." Mrs. Shi nodded with satisfaction and handed the matter of Su Muyu entering the company to Zhao Yi. When he arrived at the company, Zhao Yi couldn't hold back. "You came to me yourself. Don't blame me for making things difficult for you." Zhao Yi smiled secretly, ready to take this opportunity to take down Su Muyu. Because of concealing her identity, no one asked about Su Muyu when she went to the office. This made her feel a lot more relaxed. She didn't want to attract attention and affect the progress of the plan. As soon as she sat down, a team leader came over and handed her the chores of printing. "You should know how to print, right? The printer is over there. Remember to bind it and send it over." The team leader didn't take her seriously at all, and his tone was contemptuous. Su Muyu didn't take it, but looked up and told him calmly, "This kind of chores is not my job." The team leader sneered and threw a stack of information to her, which caused a small gust of wind and blew her hair. "Since you are so good, then you can do this plan. Submit it to Party A before the end of get off work today." This plan has been rejected several times, and the company is worried about it. Zhao Yi intends to use this matter to embarrass Su Muyu, and when the time is right, he will come out to play a hero to save the beauty. Su Muyu glanced at it and said calmly, "Okay." The team leader was angry and embarrassed. She was so arrogant. "If you can't do it well, you can also pack up and leave." He threatened angrily and turned away. Zhao Yi was watching everything on the monitor, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise. He was very satisfied with the team leader's performance. He just wanted to make Su Muyu suffer unfair treatment. When he appeared again, he would definitely move her. When it was almost time to get off work, the team leader came to check the results. He saw Su Muyu doing something irrelevant on the computer, and mistakenly thought that she could not complete the task and had given up, and he smiled proudly for a while. He, "I remember you agreed to pack up and leave if you can't do it well, right?" The team leader said sarcastically. Zhao Yi walked out of the private office, ready to come and rescue Su Muyu from the dire situation. "What?" The team leader's voice was very loud. Zhao Yi thought he was teaching Su Muyu a lesson, and the smile on the corner of his mouth was hard to hide, so he walked over quickly. "Okay, what are you arguing about?" The team leader's face turned pale, and he looked at Zhao Yi guiltily and lowered his head. "Muyu is new here, just be patient, don't scare her." Zhao Yi's tone was gentle, but he was too strong, and he thought he was very gentle, but he looked greasy. No. The team leader stammered and couldn't explain it clearly for a while. Su Muyu smiled lightly and presented her finished plan to Zhao Yi. "I'm not embarrassed, so don't worry about it." "What?" Zhao Yi was stunned, grabbed the mouse in disbelief, and read the content carefully. "It's actually completed. And just by scanning it, you can tell that it's done well, not just a casual effort. Do I still have to pack up and leave?" Su Muyu supported her chin with one hand and glanced back and forth between the two of them like watching a good show. This play was well performed, but unfortunately she didn't get the script and couldn't cooperate with the performance. The team leader looked ugly and agreed reluctantly, "Of course not. This is just a test for you." Zhao Yi secretly clenched his fists, with nowhere to vent his anger. Chapter 13 Cuckold. After returning to the Shi family villa, Mrs. Shi took the initiative to mention Su Muyu's performance in the company today. "I heard from Zhao Yi that you have adapted well." She didn't have much hope for Su Muyu, but she didn't expect that the result was not bad. With more training, she could be presentable and worthy of her Yan. Sumuyu smiled modestly. No, it's all because of my mother's good teaching. Mrs. Shi was very fond of sweet talk. She smiled with wrinkles on her face. She patted her shoulder and encouraged, it's good that you are willing to learn, but don't neglect to take care of Yan. I know. She returned to the room. As expected, Shi Xiu Yan was awake. What are you doing in the company? Shi Xiu Yan asked straight to the point with a cold tone. Although his tone has always been flat, like a cold lake, but today his eyes are obviously more warning. He is doubting Sumuyu. Sumuyu maintained her calmness on the surface, and still acted innocent and weak. I just want to learn some new knowledge. Stop pretending, how do you know how to make a plan? Shi Xiu Yan directly exposed her disguise and asked aggressively. Sumuyu pursed her lips tightly, and a thin layer of sweat appeared on her palms. She had been staying in the room, but Shi Xiu Yan was so well informed. I said I would compensate you, but don't covet something that doesn't belong to you. Shi Xiu Yan thought she admitted it, and a hint of gloom flashed across his eyes. He stared at her coldly and warned her bluntly not to continue. I didn't. Sumuyu paused. I just went into study as an ordinary person. No matter what your purpose is, you'd better take the initiative to ask to leave the company immediately. Shi Xiu Yan ignored her rebuttal and just stated his request domineeringly. Sumuyu didn't pretend anymore. She spread her hands and told him lazily, I won't leave on my own initiative. Your mother likes me to make you proud. He was so confident. Shi Xiu Yan pretended to be angry, and looked at her with a scrutinizing look, as if he wanted to see through her. There is no need for this, don't let me think you have ulterior motives. Of course I have no second thoughts, but you, who don't trust your bedmate so much, aren't you afraid of others being disappointed? Sumuyu was angry and unwilling to compromise with Shi Xiu Yan's power, but he didn't intend to quarrel, just expressing his dissatisfaction rationally. Don't think of yourself as a bedmate. Shi Xiu Yan retracted his gaze, leaving only an empty chill. Sumuyu. The conversation between the two ended in a bad mood, but Sumuyu was the only one who knew that Shi Xiu Yan had woken up, and she had to bring him food. The next day, Sumuyu went to work as usual, totally ignoring Shi Xiu Yan's warning. When she went to the tea room, she heard a familiar voice, so she stopped and listened for a while. He, what's the point of talking about cooperation? Why don't you talk about love with me? This was Zhao Yi's voice, and one could imagine his lustful expression just by listening to their voice. Sumuyu thought it was an unspoken rule in the office and didn't want to meddle in other people's business, but she heard another familiar voice. Oh. Qingming will come to pick me up later, what if I'm seen? Su Qing said coquettishly, not meaning to refuse at all. Sumuyu chuckled and drank a sip of water with a playful look in her eyes. It seems that this is the big gift that Su's father prepared for her that day. It seems that Su Qing likes it very much and looks like she enjoys it. Afraid that she would be disgusted, Sumuyu took the water cup back to her workstation and ran into Fang Qingming by chance. Seeing that it was Sumuyu, Fang Qingming mocked her for being just a small clerk in the end, and the Shi family only used her as a reproductive tool. Reproductive tool? That's better than not knowing whether the child you gave birth to is your own. Sumuyu raised a faint smile at the corner of her mouth, and glanced at him with a mocking look. What do you mean? Fang Qingming didn't understand what she meant, and immediately clenched his fists and questioned. Sumuyu didn't say anything more, his fingers tapped on the keyboard. When she thought that Fang Qingming was cheated, she felt very happy and kindly told him to pay more attention. It doesn't mean anything. Don't you understand it? Su Qing came over at this time. She saw Fang Qingming talking to Sumuyu, strode over angrily, took his hand, and swore her sovereignty. Why are you talking to my fiancé? Do you still have any illusions? Su Qing stared at Sumuyu and asked sternly. Sumuyu smiled perfunctorily, I'm going to work, can you handle your own housework? Su Qing didn't understand what she meant, but Fang Qingming suddenly shook her hand away, staring at her sternly and angrily. What's wrong? Su Qing asked in a panic, feeling a little guilty, with a layer of mist in her eyes, looking at him innocently. Fang Qingming couldn't bear it for a moment, so he suppressed his anger a little and just asked sternly, are you looking for a man behind my back? Su Qing's heart trembled, and she adjusted her expression in time, went over to hold his hand in a flattering way, and said coquettishly in a wrong tone, how can you believe her? She just wants to sow discord, why do you still believe it? I came here to discuss business, but you question me like this. As she spoke, her tone was tinged with tears, and her eyes were red. Fang Qingming softened his heart, blinded by her performance, rubbed her shoulders, and comforted her instead. I'm sorry, baby. I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted you like this. Don't cry. Fang Qingming and Su Qing went back together. Before leaving, he did not forget to ridicule Su Muyu. It's useless to try to alienate our relationship. The next day, Su Qing came again and went straight to Su Muyu's position. Su Muyu. I warn you, don't meddle in other people's business. Su Qing slapped Su Muyu's desk heavily and warned her sternly. It was Su Muyu who gave this matter a favor. Otherwise, how could she have an unclean relationship with Zhao Yi? You don't have to sit here and work today. There are other things for you to do here. Su Qing threw their work requirements on the table and raised the corners of her mouth provocatively, eager to prove that she could step on Su Muyu at any time. Su Muyu did not refuse. She was looking for an opportunity to contact other places. After arriving at the construction site, Su Muyu quickly adapted to the environment here and began to arrange work. When she was standing downstairs, she suddenly noticed some smoke and dust falling. She looked up and saw that the rooftop that had just been built had collapsed. Chapter 14 Report. Seeing that the wooden frame and bricks were about to fall down, Su Muyu didn't have time to think about it. She grabbed an iron pillar beside her, exerted force on her hands, turned half a circle and threw herself out. Boom! A part of the eaves collapsed, and the scaffolding fell heavily on the ground, instantly raising a large amount of smoke and dust. The workers heard the noise and ran to check the situation. Are you okay? Did anyone get hit? Su Muyu frowned, covered her mouth and nose with one hand, and shook the other hand to show that she was fine. If she hadn't reacted quickly, she would have been smashed to death here. What's going on? How could the collapse happen? Su Muyu said sternly, and called the workers responsible for this part of the construction. The workers were also panicked. Their mouths didn't seem to be enough, and they raised their hands to gesture, eager to explain clearly. This is not our problem. The materials are all ready, we just use them, and the construction steps are fine. How do we know why this happened? Fortunately, there were no casualties, otherwise this matter would have been a big deal. Su Muyu quickly glanced at the people present, trying to find something wrong. Her sharp eyes were full of scrutiny and confusion. Although Su Qing had the motive to harm her, the construction here has not been 1 or 2 days, and Su Qing has no time to prepare. Who could it be? Suddenly, Su Muyu's eyes darkened, and she felt more certain. Clean up the site first, and don't continue construction in this area. Su Muyu ordered, and turned back to the office building. She went to the bathroom to tidy up her appearance first, and her grey clothes were too eye-catching. Su Muyu waited at the door where the documents were stored until she figured out the personnel exchanges here, and then walked in when no one was paying attention, with a calm and serious expression on her face. She picked up the document calmly and looked for the information she was looking for at a glance. Found it. Su Muyu secretly breathed a sigh of relief and began to check the information. As she expected, after careful comparison, she was sure that there was a problem with the project funds. Someone embezzled the money and made a black account. Tofu shoddy project. Su Muyu gritted her teeth, narrowed her eyes, and showed a warning look. If someone was injured, that person would be guilty of death. She calmly put the file back to its original place and left the office. A man passed by her. Su Muyu's eyes did not stay on him, but she did not expect the man to suddenly turn around and grab her arm. Stop. Su Muyu frowned. What do you want? I should ask you this question, right? Miss Su. Su Muyu was startled. How did this person know her? The man let go of her hand and introduced himself. I am Jin Hong, Mr. Shi's assistant. What are you doing here? Jin Hong stared at Su Muyu with sharp eyes, and his slightly narrowed eyes showed a suspicious look. Su Muyu swept the clothes that he had wrinkled, and replied in a casual tone, I brought the information here to store it. They always asked me to do some trivial things. She sighed lightly, pretended to be helpless and shrugged her shoulders, showing that she was very aggrieved. Jin Hong did not completely believe her explanation, but did not continue to embarrass her. After she left, he strode into the office and walked towards the cabinet where the construction documents were stored with a clear goal. Su Muyu was covered in dust, and he had just learned that there was a collapse problem at the construction site, and the direction was obvious. After careful checking, Jin Hong also found the problem, and his eyes widened slightly, both angry and shocked. How could she know? Shi Xiu Yan received a call from Jin Hong and stood in front of the French window with his hands behind his back. What's the matter? There was corruption in the construction project, the construction fee was tampered with, the materials were inferior, and a collapse accident was discovered. Jin Hong told him everything that happened and waited for his instructions. After hesitating for a moment, Jin Hong still told him about his unexpected encounter with Sumuyu. Did she find it? Shi Xiu Yan's expression was complicated, with a hint of suspicion between his eyebrows. Jin Hong did not dare to make a rash conclusion, and said objectively and conservatively, not sure, just guessing, or it could just be a coincidence. But she was almost injured. Got it. Shi Xiu Yan replied ambiguously and hung up the phone. It stands to reason that Sumuyu would not go to the construction site in person, so why? After Sumuyu confirmed that the project was embezzled, she decisively chose to report anonymously. It's not okay to keep this shoddy project. She sent the information to the relevant departments and waited quietly for the matter to be resolved justly. The relevant departments soon came to investigate the construction team, and the construction was forced to suspend. Zhao Yi was so angry when he learned about this that he angrily pounded the table in the office and vented his anger. Who is it? The assistant did not dare to say a word and stood aside with his head down. Zhao Yi looked at him and asked him to check the surveillance immediately to see who had been to the data room today. The assistant was a little nervous and told him weakly, I have just checked it, but the surveillance video has disappeared. Disappeared? How could it disappear? Zhao Yi became even more angry and suddenly swept the documents on the table to the ground, making a crackling sound. The scolding could be heard by people outside the office. This anger soon spread to other people. Everyone stays to work overtime today. Make up for all their wasted time. Zhao Yi slammed the door of the office and announced without question. Everyone dared to be angry but did not dare to speak, silently bearing the consequences of Zhao Yi's anger. At this time, Su Qing came to the company to find Zhao Yi, but unfortunately she came at the wrong time. Her coquettishness was very annoying to Zhao Yi. Get away. I don't have time to play with you. Zhao Yi said rudely, shook off Su Qing's hand, and returned to the office alone with a dull face. Su Qing, who was scolded for no reason, didn't know how to react for a while. After asking someone to clarify, she was also furious. What does it have to do with me? Why are you scolding me? Su Qing walked up to Sumuyu, put her hands on her hips, and called her name word by word, Su. Mu. You. Did you do this? Sumuyu was doing her own thing and sneered sarcastically. Do you know the kicking cat effect? You are the poor kitten. You are already the last link. It's useless to vent your anger on me. What a mess. Su Qing didn't understand what she was saying, and continued in an excited tone, who else can it be except you? I asked you to go to the construction site today, and something happened at the construction site. Seeing that Sumuyu didn't take her seriously, Su Qing was furious. Without saying a word, she snatched her mouse and threw it to the ground. Answer my question. Chapter 15, Confidence Failed. Su Qing made quite a commotion, attracting a lot of attention. Have you had enough of making trouble? Is there anything else you can do besides making trouble unreasonably? Sumuyu was also getting impatient. His sharp eyes were like a knife, colliding with Su Qing's angry glare. You dare to do it but you don't dare to take responsibility for it, and you still say I am being unreasonable. Su Qing was so angry that she wanted to smash her computer. As soon as she stretched out her hand, Sumuyu grabbed her wrist. The huge difference in strength made Su Qing stunned, and the feeling of powerlessness to break free made her even more annoyed. Instead of being so impotent and furious here, you might as well go try to please the person you cheated with. Sumuyu shook her hand off heavily, and the impact caused Su Qing to take a few steps back, almost spraining her ankle and falling to the ground. Su Qing was too embarrassed to look at this embarrassing scene. She crossed her arms over her chest and glanced at the people around her with a guilty look, fearing that she would embarrass herself. Su Qing sneered and said, "You asked for this. Don't blame me for being cruel." After that, she walked away with heavy steps in her high heels. Sumuyu picked up her mouse in a dignified manner, wiped it with some heartache, and said to herself with a little regret, I should have broken her dirty hands earlier. When it was almost time to get off work, a colleague came over and told Sumuyu to help get some information from a certain room as she couldn't do it by herself. Sumuyu didn't think much and followed her. When we were halfway there, my colleague suddenly remembered that he had forgotten to take something, so he went back first. Sumuyu went into the room alone, and when he was looking for information according to the serial number, the lights were suddenly turned off. When she turned her head, she saw the door was closed, and the last ray of light was blocked outside. Bang! The door was slammed shut, followed by the urgent sound of the door being locked. Sumuyu. Only then did she realize that this was another of Su Qing's doing. There was no time to be angry, so Sumuyu took out his cell phone, turned on the flashlight, and looked for other ways to open the door and get out. Night. It's been 2 hours since the end of get off work, and Sumuyu hasn't returned home yet. Mrs. Shi's face looked obviously ugly. She sat on the sofa with her hands folded across her chest and her brows furrowed. Could something have happened to her? Mrs. Shi guessed worriedly. After all, Sumuyu has been very obedient and honest during this period of time and has never come home late without reason. Sharon snickered at the side, pretending to be exaggerated, fanning the flames. Maybe she couldn't stand the loneliness and went out to find a man to play with. Isn't that what young girls do? Madame Shi frowned, shook her head gently, and consoled herself. I don't think she is that kind of person. You are wrong. I just asked my son, and he said that Sumuyu is not in the company and had left work a long time ago. Sharon sighed, revealing a hint of gloating. The less Sumuyu was liked by Madame Shi, the more proud she became. After a while, Sumuyu finally pushed the door open and walked in, looking a little tired. Her cell phone ran out of battery, so she could only pry open the lock in the dark and finally escaped. She had no way of contacting Mrs. Shi. Why did you wait until now to come back? Where have you been? Mrs. Shi asked her sternly with a straight face. Sumuyu told the truth and said that he was locked in the room and couldn't get out. However, this statement sounded very unbelievable to Mrs. Shi. It seemed more like an excuse she made to fool herself, and a very poor one at that. How could he be locked up? Who would be so bored? Mrs. Shi sneered sarcastically. Sumuyu was too lazy to even find a better excuse. Did she still take her as a parent seriously? Sumuyu felt that she was in the wrong. She couldn't explain herself clearly, so she bowed her head and admitted her mistake. Have you studied hard in the company? I didn't ask you to go to the company to just mess around. Mrs. Shi suggested that she test her to check her recent learning achievements. Because he was always being bullied by Su Qing, Sumuyu would be called to do some unimportant, tiring and dirty work from time to time. How could he have the time to learn new knowledge? Mrs. Shi asked several professional questions, but Sumuyu's answers were not satisfactory, and the atmosphere became visibly tense. Sharon snickered and said something sarcastic. It seems like you have been busy doing other things in the company. I didn't. I just. Sumuyu wanted to defend himself, but was interrupted by Mrs. Shi. I don't know what you're doing. You can't even learn these. Do you dare to say that you are serious? Mrs. Shi directly used the result to deny Sumuyu's efforts. Since there were no results, what difference did it make whether he tried hard or not? Sumuyu pursed her lips tightly. This sentence obviously hit her self-confidence and made her feel a little self-doubtful. I understand. I will study hard. After accepting Mrs. Shi's lesson, Sumuyu returned to her room. Although she was frustrated, she did not give up on herself. Instead, she took out her study materials and actively prepared for the CPA exam. Shi Xiu Yan stood behind her, narrowed his deep eyes slightly, looked at her for a few seconds and then dropped his gaze to the study materials. You want to take this test? Sumuyu didn't even raise her head, and said in a light tone, No, I'm just reading this because I have nothing to do. Shi Xiu Yan. He became a little angry after being choked by her for no reason. He coughed lightly and teased her deliberately, I wanted to teach you, but since you don't want to take the test, forget it. Hearing him say this, Sumuyu raised her head and looked at him, her eyes flashing brightly, blinking at him, her expression filled with expectation and pleading. Will you teach me? Sometimes with the guidance of Xiu Yang, a big boss, plus her strong learning ability, wouldn't tea preparation for the exam be twice as effective with half the effort? I didn't say that. Shi Xiu Yan arrogantly poured cold water on her face and turned to leave. Sumuyu got anxious and grabbed his hand. She threatened him, if you don't teach me, I won't give you food. You have to know that Shi Xiu Yan's movements are restricted and he relies on her to deliver food. If it weren't for her, Shi Xiu Yan would have to rely on glucose drips to make a living, and he would probably go crazy after a while. Shi Xiu Yan gently brushed her hand away and stared at her with threatening eyes. Are you threatening me? Sumuyu withdrew his hand awkwardly, raised his chin awkwardly, and said calmly, "Of course not, I want to exchange with you. I will cook for you and you will teach me. It will be mutually beneficial. How about that?" Seeing that Shi Xiu Yan was silent, it seemed that he was seriously considering this matter. Sumuyu quickly added another condition: "You can eat anything you want, I can make it." Chapter 16, Accidentally Hit. Although he had already agreed in his heart, Shi Xiu Yan still put on a reluctant expression and said lightly, "Okay then." With the support of the big boss Shi Xiu Yan, Sumuyu's confidence increased greatly. He stood up and politely pushed the chair away for him to sit down. "Then I'll prepare it for you now, you take a look first." Sumuyu's eyes were curved, and her fawning look seemed somehow cute to Shi Xiu Yan. He shook his head, telling himself not to think too much about it. Sumuyu went to the kitchen to make snacks, which attracted Mrs. Shi's attention. "Are you hungry again?" Sumuyu has been eating a lot these past few days, and can even eat 2 portions. Now he wants to find some snacks. Could it be? Mrs. Shi thought of a possibility and her eyes lit up. She went over, patted her arm, and looked into her eyes expectantly. "Are you pregnant?" Hearing this, Sumuyu almost spit it out. She managed to hold it back and patted her chest with lingering fear. "How can you say that?" Madame Shi covered her mouth and said teasingly with a smile, "I see you can eat enough for 2 people now, is there one more person?" The speaker may not mean it, but the listener may take it seriously. There were indeed 2 people, but the extra one was not Sumuyu's child, but Madame Shi's child. Sumuyu smiled guiltily and used the movements of making snacks to hide her discomfort and avoid meeting Madame Shi's eyes. "No, maybe I'm tired from work lately, so I eat a lot." Mrs. Shi was immersed in the joy of holding her grandson and interrupted her explanation. "How can you eat twice as much as before just because you are tired? I'll find someone to check you out." Having said that, Mrs. Shi turned around to get her cell phone. Despite Sumuyu's attempts to stop her, she had already made an appointment with a doctor. At this point, Sumuyu had no choice but to agree to the examination, and reluctantly considered what to do after Madame Shi's false joy. Sharon stayed by the side during the examination. He felt uneasy, but still put on an expectant expression and chatted with Mrs. Shi. The doctor said that Sumuyu was not pregnant. Sharon finally breathed a sigh of relief and gently patted Mrs. Shi's shoulder to comfort her. "You're overthinking it. It's not that easy to get pregnant." Madame Shi lowered her head, holding her forehead with one hand and massaging her temple with the other, saying in annoyance, "But she eats too much. Eat a lot." Sharon became alert. "Yeah, she can eat as much as 2 people by herself. This is too abnormal, so Mrs. Shi can't help but be suspicious." Sharon was very wary of the phrase, 2 people. He was so anxious that he could not calm down. He found an excuse to go out and call Zhao Yi. "If you don't take action against Sumuyu quickly, I'm afraid Shi Xiu Yan will really wake up. That Sumuyu is really a bit weird." Zhao Yi was also anxious, but ever since he was scared by their ghost last time, he had no chance to go over. If Shi Xiu Yan really wakes up, all their plans will be overturned. "New," Zhao Yi said in annoyance and hung up the phone impatiently. Weekend. Shi Xiu Yan secretly went out to find a private doctor to help with rehabilitation, leaving Sumuyu to guard the room in case anyone came to check on the situation. Sumuyu used the excuse that she was studying to prevent other people from coming, allowing Shi Xiu Yan to leave without worry. Jin Hong was responsible for contacting the private doctor. With Jin Hong's full support, Shi Xiu Yan arrived at the agreed location smoothly. "Is everything okay at home for you to come out like this?" Jin Hong bowed slightly and asked carefully. Shi Xiu Yan said, and the image of Sumuyu making a promise to him appeared in his mind. Just now he questioned whether she was reliable, but she retorted him instead. Her unconvinced expression left a deep impression on him. No one had ever dared to treat him like this before. Shi Xiu Yan couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth and chuckled. His usually serious expression relaxed and a gentle smile flashed across his icy eyes. Jin Hong saw this expression clearly, and for a moment he wondered if he was hallucinating. Could it be that Shizong is in love? "I think Sumuyu is pretty good. She's very smart and was able to check the accounts and see if there was something wrong with the construction costs in a short period of time." Jin Hong took the opportunity to praise Sumuyu. Besides being what was in his heart, he also intended to test Shi Xiu Yan. "She's still a long way from that." Shi Xiu Yan regained his composure and complained to Jin Hong, you talk too much nonsense. Jin Hong. Shi Xiu Yan was originally thinking about Sumuyu, and he did not find Jin Hong's words abrupt. Instead, he fell into deeper thoughts about Sumuyu. She is indeed very powerful, but this is not necessarily a good thing. After being urged by Sharon, Zhao Yi became more anxious to take action against Sumuyu. He also had to deal with the engineering team's affairs, so he decided to solve both problems at the same time. 2 days later, Zhao Yi came to the office to find Sumuyu and asked in a commanding tone, "I want to cooperate with Lianluo Construction Company again. Is it okay for you to come with me?" Due to his status as an ordinary employee, Sumuyu could not refuse and could only agree. Zhao Yi did not tell her in advance that the so-called discussion of cooperation was actually about asking her to drink with him, and the meeting place was in a private room in the restaurant. Sumuyu just dressed casually, and she looked fresh and refined among the women with heavy makeup, which made her more eye-catching. "Why did you come to a place like this?" Only after getting off the car did Sumuyu realize that he had been cheated. Zhao Yi showed a wicked smile of success, and said fearlessly, "So what if this place is like this? This is the best place to do business. At this point, all we can do is improvise." Sumuyu always had a polite smile on her face and used official language. She was really here to discuss business. The other boss couldn't stand it anymore, so he waved his hand and told someone in a loud voice to pour her some wine. "Since you're here, why don't you have a couple of drinks? Aren't you giving me face?" "That's what I mean. It's okay for you to just have 2 drinks. You don't have to drive." Zhao Yi agreed with a laugh. Seeing that he had to drink it, Sumuyu stared at the waiter's hands carefully, taking in all his movements. The wine was freshly opened and there was nothing dirty on his hands. She then raised her glass and politely toasted the boss, "I'd rather obey than be polite." Zhao Yi stared at her lips, which were slightly moistened by the wine, with burning eyes, and smiled from ear to ear, and asked people to pour more wine even more vigorously. "Okay. Keep drinking. Don't stop until you're drunk." Of course Sumuyu didn't drink at all. After drinking 2 glasses, he declined all the toasts afterwards. She suddenly realized something was wrong, frowned, and secretly felt her own pulse under the table. Her heart beat so fast. It was just 2 glasses of wine, she wasn't drunk. Was it because she was careless or there was something wrong with the glass? Chapter 17, Give It If You Say So. Sumuyu realized that something was increasingly wrong with his body, so he pretended to be calm and stood up, saying that he wanted to go to the bathroom. Zhao Yi, who saw through everything, squinted his eyes and looked at her, unable to wait any longer. After closing the door of the box, Sumuyu leaned against the wall. His hands and feet felt a little weak, and he was a little flustered when he took out his phone. She sent her location information to Zhonglin, wanting to ask him for help, but her fingers were out of control and she pressed the button several times without success. At this moment, Sumuyu heard Zhao Yi saying in the box that he also wanted to come out. "Oh no." Sumuyu frowned and was thinking quickly about what to do when a hand grabbed her from behind. "Who?" "Oh." Before she could turn around, the other person covered her mouth. The other person put one hand around her slender waist from behind and easily dragged her into a room. After closing the door, Sumuyu used up all his remaining strength, stepped hard on the other person's foot, and took the opportunity to break free. "Oh." The other party groaned in pain. Sumuyu turned around and took defensive actions with alertness, but was surprised to find it turned out to be Shi Xiu Yan. "You, how come you are here?" Sumuyu was confused. She actually stepped on him. This made Shi Xiu Yan, who already had difficulty walking, even worse. Shi Xiu Yan sighed helplessly and could only blame himself for his bad luck. Seeing that he was about to walk to the sofa, Sumuyu guiltily went over to help him, but she didn't have the strength, her legs went weak, and she and Shi Xiu Yan both fell onto the sofa. Shi Xiu Yan. The unfamiliar soft touch made him feel confused and he didn't know how to react for a moment. Sumuyu was so exhausted that she pressed on Shi Xiu Yan. Knowing that he didn't like being so close to others, she tried to get up quickly. But she didn't even have the strength to get up. Her hands on the sofa went limp and she fell on him again. "Sorry." Sumuyu became even more panicked, and her words almost turned into gasps. She wanted to get up, but her hands couldn't find a support point, as if she was touching Shi Xiu Yan's body randomly. Finally, she lay limp against him, her face flushed with shame. "Not touching anymore." Shi Xiu Yan didn't move, he lowered his eyes and looked at Sumuyu, who was gasping for breath on his chest. His tone sounded teasing. Sumuyu cried out for injustice, saying that she just didn't have the strength to do it and had no intention of touching anyone. "Push me away. I have no strength left." She gave up struggling and squeezed out these words with difficulty between gasps. However, Shi Xiu Yan remained unmoved, and the two of them just lay there quietly. Not sure if it was Sumuyu's illusion, but she actually felt that Shi Xiu Yan's heartbeat was a little faster. As soon as this thought came to her mind, Sumuyu denied it. Maybe it was the sound of her own heartbeat. "You're not going to get up?" she asked in confusion. Shi Xiu Yan replied calmly, "I can't do anything either." Sumuyu was speechless. She almost forgot that Shi Xiu Yan was a vegetative person whose recovery was not complete. "Don't stay in the company anymore. You are not suitable. Today is a lesson for you." Shi Xiu Yan closed his eyes to hide his arrogant look. Even though Shi Xiu Yan tried his best to soften his tone, Sumuyu still found it hard to accept. "I have no money," she said coldly, making up a tacky excuse. Shi Xiu Yan raised his eyebrows and jokingly asked, "As my wife, would you be short of money?" "The Shi family's nanny will never say that she has no money. I just don't have any." She had originally just answered in a normal tone, but the effect of the drug made everything she said sound like she was acting coquettishly, and her voice couldn't help but rise at the end of her sentence, making the listeners feel like there was a kitten scratching their hearts. Shi Xiu Yan breathed a sigh of relief, moved her away from him, and let her lie on the sofa. He took out a black card from his pocket and handed it to her. "Are you still saying you have no money?" Sumuyu just wanted to find an excuse to fool him, but she didn't expect him to be so generous. "The world's limited black card is available at your convenience." She swallowed silently and asked unwillingly, "Is it for me?" Shi Xiu Yan looked down at her flushed face and those eyes that were a mixture of desire and curiosity. He suppressed the throbbing in his heart and just smiled slightly. "Yes." Sumuyu had not returned for a long time, and everyone in the box became suspicious. Especially Zhao Yi, his face gradually turned darker as time passed. He just went out to look for Sumuyu, but he couldn't find her. Where could she have gone in such a short time? "What's wrong with your assistant? Do you want to go and check it out? A drunk girl can be very dangerous." The boss of the construction company smiled and teased in an obscene manner. Zhao Yi echoed with a sigh and stood up. "I'll go take a look." He left the box, thinking depressedly, what was wrong with Sumuyu? How dare she just leave him and run away? Instead of finding Sumuyu, Zhao Yi met Su Qing. "Why are you here?" Su Qing looked around, curious about what Zhao Yi was looking for. Zhao Yi said impatiently, "I'm talking about business." Seeing that he was in a bad mood, Su Qing wisely stopped asking questions and asked him caringly, "Do you want me to go with you? You've drunk too much." Zhao Yi then glanced down at her, and after a moment's silence, he agreed. Back in the box, the boss laughed, "Great, the assistant just now is gone, and you found a new one so quickly." Su Qing smiled shyly, took Zhao Yi's hand, snuggled up behind him, and quietly acted like a vase. The boss liked her shy look very much, and his lustful eyes were fixed on Su Qing without any concealment. "This little girl is really cute. I wonder if she is Mr. Zhao's girlfriend." Zhao Yi denied it without even thinking about it. "You're overthinking this." The smile on Su Qing's face froze, her eyes suddenly darkened, she forced a smile and glanced at her boss awkwardly. Even if she wasn't his girlfriend, saying it directly in this situation would be an insult to her. Since she was not Zhao Yi's girlfriend, the boss's eyes became bolder and bolder, and he even wanted to call Su Qing to come over to him. "In that case, Mr. Zhao, is it okay for her to accompany me?" His attitude was frivolous and he showed no respect for Su Qing. Su Qing was enraged and looked at Zhao Yi angrily, wanting him to make a statement. However, Zhao Yi didn't take Su Qing seriously. Since the boss liked her, it would be better if they could get the cooperation smoothly. He nodded and smiled. "Of course, no problem. It's her blessing that you like her." "What are you talking about?" Su Qing angrily shook off his hand and looked at him in disbelief. "He is crazy. Who do you take her for? Why, don't you want to?" Zhao Yi looked at her angrily, with a warning tone in his eyes. Chapter 18 Accidental Exposure. Su Qing was so angry that she almost bit her teeth off. Her face turned purple and her nails were tightly grasping her palms. She glanced at the people in the box, but she couldn't swallow this anger. She threw away her cold face and pushed the door open. "I won't accompany you." Because she walked too fast and stepped too heavily, the heel of her high heels broke, and she sprained her ankle after walking out of the box. Su Qing fell to the ground and took off her high heels in an awkward manner. Just when she was at a loss as to what to do, Su Muyu passed by. When Su Qing found out it was Su Muyu, she couldn't hold back her face and angrily scolded, "Are you here to accompany me for drinks? You are so despicable. Su Muyu." She left without paying any attention to Su Qing's dog-biting people. Inside the box, Zhao Yi's face was gloomy, his eyes were red, and he was trying hard to suppress his anger. First, Su Muyu disappeared, and then Su Qing gave him a cold look. Each and every one of them made him lose face in front of the boss. "Go call a few girls to keep you company, money is not a problem," Zhao Yi said arrogantly, trying to save face. After finally agreeing on the cooperation, Zhao Yi returned home and angrily threw his coat on the sofa. Sharon saw that his face was not right, so he asked sternly, "Failed again? I don't know where this bitch went. And she embarrassed me in front of everyone." The anger churned in his chest, almost making his mind explode. Sharon was so disappointed that he sighed in frustration. "If this continues, I'm afraid we'll have to find another way." "Of course not. Let's do it tonight." In order to go all out, Zhao Yi decided to use the most risky method and put the incense directly into Su Muyu's room. Although it is easy to leave evidence, once successful, it will be done once and for all. Zhao Yi lit the incense, stuffed it into the crack of the room door late at night, and waited outside the door for the drug to take effect. "That's enough. Just be my woman." Zhao Yi looked at the time on his mobile phone, rubbed his palms with a sly smile, pushed open the door and walked in. The smell of the incense was very faint. Zhao Yi frowned and became a little suspicious. But when he saw Su Muyu lying on the bed without any reaction, he dispelled this doubt. "I guess it's because time has passed and the smell of the incense has evaporated." Zhao Yi touched the bed and was about to pull Su Muyu's quilt. As soon as he stretched out his hand, he saw Su Muyu opened his eyes. "What? You?" Zhao Yi was startled by her. When he tried to step back, she grabbed his wrist and he was unable to break free for a while. "You really are a thief with a heart of your own." There was a flash of cruelty in Su Muyu's eyes, and in the dim night, there seemed to be a cold light shooting out, which made Zhao Yi feel uneasy. After noticing the strange smell, Su Muyu got up, disposed of the incense, and waited for Zhao Yi to come. "If you have anything to say, just go to Madame Shi and speak clearly." The culprit was caught red-handed, and there was no point in Zhao Yi's defense. Hateful. Zhao Yi gritted his teeth, and with his other hand he took out a bottle of spray from his pocket and sprayed it on Su Muyu's face when she wasn't paying attention. What? Things happened too suddenly. Su Muyu was completely unprepared and inhaled a large amount of fog. Su Muyu's legs went weak and he collapsed to the ground. "Har har, do you think I would come here unprepared? Just be obedient." Zhao Yi struggled to pull Su Muyu up, breathed a sigh of relief, and smiled knowingly. A cold voice suddenly came from behind, "Take your dirty hands away." Zhao Yi's heart skipped a beat and he turned around to see Shi Xiu Yan standing behind him. You. Are you a human or a ghost?" The last time Shi Xiu Yan dressed up as a ghost to scare him, he suffered a psychological trauma and he still hasn't recovered from it. Zhao Yi threw Su Muyu to the ground and ran, stumbling out of Shi Xiu Yan's room, shouting that it was haunted, causing quite a commotion. Sharon, who was guarding the corridor to keep watch for Zhao Yi, was the first to notice something was wrong. He glanced at Zhao Yi who was running away, then walked into Shi Xiu Yan's room with a cold face. "How could there be a ghost? I want to see who has been playing tricks to scare my son." Sharon didn't believe it, so he opened the door with his hands on his hips and shouted angrily, "Where is the ghost?" Instead of seeing a ghost, he was met with Shi Xiu Yan's sharp gaze, which was like a sharp knife piercing his heart. "You're awake." Sharon was horrified and subconsciously took 2 steps back, stammering and unable to speak. Finally coming to her senses, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "Shi Xiu Yan is awake." Mrs. Shi came to Shi Xiu Yan's room and saw that he was indeed awake. She was deeply moved with tears in her eyes. "Yan, you finally woke up." Mrs. Shi was immersed in the joy that Shi Xiu Yan had woken up, and was talking to him, so she didn't notice Su Muyu for a while. At this time, Su Muyu had just woken up and his body was still a little weak. As soon as he opened his eyes, he found that Shi Xiu Yan's awakening was exposed, and he felt very guilty. If she hadn't accidentally fallen into Zhao Yi's trap, Shi Xiu Yan wouldn't have had to expose herself. What's going on? Madame Shi looked at Sumuyu seriously with a stern face. How come you didn't know that our Yang had woken up? Sumuyu's guilty eyes moved between Zhao Yi and Shirong. She pretended that she didn't dare to speak. In the end, she lowered her head awkwardly and remained silent. Let the Shi family members fight over their own affairs, she doesn't want to get involved. What? Are you mute? Mrs. Shi frowned and her tone became heavier. I would like to ask Zhao Yi, when did you get the right to use my room? Shi Xiu Yan fixed Zhao Yi with a scrutinizing and warning look. Zhao Yi trembled guiltily and almost fell down. He lowered his head and dared not speak. What do you mean? Zhao Yi, what were you doing in Ian's room? Mrs. Shi glared at him viciously. Shirong hurriedly put Zhao Yi behind him and said with a smile, did you misunderstand? He might just be passing by. You might as well say it was sleepwalking, that would be more convincing. Shi Xiu Yan sneered and said sarcastically. Shirong had not expected Shi Xiu Yan to be so aggressive. He pursed his lips tightly and looked at him angrily but not daring to say anything. What's going on? Mrs. Shi turned her gaze to Sumuyu again. Sumuyu acted timidly, looked at Shi Xiu Yan with a pleading look, and muttered, I'm so scared. This weak look is completely different from the person just now. Zhao Yi gritted his teeth, feeling extremely angry. Why are you pretending? That's enough. Mrs. Shi was immersed in the joy of Shi Xiu Yan waking up, and did not want to be disappointed, so she sternly told Zhao Yi to shut up. Shirong wanted to speak for Zhao Yi, but was interrupted by Mrs. Shi. Get out, both of you. Don't disturb our Yang's rest. Chapter 19 White Moonlight. Shirong and Zhao Yi left embarrassedly, and the room finally returned to peace. I will warn them and never let this happen again. Mrs. Shi comforted Shi Xiu Yan with a gentle tone, almost like she was coaxing a child. Sumuyu turned her face away and lowered her eyes with some emotion. Shi Xiu Yan has been in a coma for so long, Madame Shi must have been looking forward to his waking up day and night. Go and push the wheelchair that we prepared earlier. Mrs. Shi urged. Seeing the wheelchair, Shi Xiu Yan narrowed his eyes slightly, with a hint of disgust. Mrs. Shi noticed his expression very keenly, smiled flatteringly, and comforted him, it's only temporary. The doctor said that your muscles will atrophy to a certain extent after you wake up, and you will need to train for a period of time. Shi Xiu Yan naturally knew this truth, as he had fallen several times before, but he couldn't help feeling a little resistant in his heart, so he just said, lightly. I plan to go back to the company, he announced. Mrs. Shi's face changed and she reminded him seriously, you just woke up, what are you doing back in the company? The company is managed by other people, so you don't have to be so anxious. Realizing that she was too emotional, Mrs. Shi relaxed her expression and softened her tone. Shi Xiu Yan laughed secretly, fearing that while he was unconscious, the Shi family was about to be emptied by outsiders. I have made up my mind, he replied without question. Madame Shi frowned and was not going to accommodate Shi Xiu Yan on this matter. She stood up and her eyes, tense with worry, fell on Sumuyu. Take good care of our Yang, don't let him go to the company, and try to persuade him. Suddenly assigned a troublesome task, Sumuyu opened his eyes wide, opened his mouth, and wanted to say something to refuse. But, you guys should have a good rest first. Mrs. Shi left this sentence, closed the door and left, without giving Sumuyu any chance to refuse. Sumuyu was embarrassed. How could she control Shi Xiu Yan? Sumuyu and Shi Xiu Yan were the only ones left in the room, looking at each other. The atmosphere was unusually silent. Your mother is worried about you, so don't go back to the company for now. Sumuyu felt helpless and gave a symbolic advice. Shi Xiu Yan lay on the bed, closed his eyes, and said coldly, it has nothing to do with you. Sumuyu. This mother and son only know how to make things difficult for her. After all, in your mother's eyes, I am your wife, so of course it has something to do with me. Sumuyu turned her face away and said unconvinced. When he heard the word wife, Shi Xiu Yan's mouth twitched, as if he had heard something ridiculous. Who was the man you contacted at the hotel? The topic changed so suddenly that Sumuyu paused before realizing that the person he was talking about was Zhang Lin. At that time, the effect of the drug had weakened, and Zhang Lin just sent a message, so she left the hotel, leaving Shi Xiu Yan there. It seemed that Shi Xiu Yan still held a grudge about this matter. If you have the ability to get there, do you still need me to send you home? Sumuyu asked back, thinking that he was too stingy. Are you trying to digress? It seemed that Shi Xiu Yan was talking about different things than her. He glanced at her sideways, somewhat speechless. He and I are friends. Su Muyu answered directly, his tone was normal, and he didn't feel there was anything wrong. Her calmness seemed justified to Shi Xiu Yan. He sneered and asked, "How dare you say that she is his wife? You also know that we are just partners. I also have Bai Guang. We just need to not interfere with each other." Shi Xiu Yan spoke frankly and clarified the potential ambiguous relationship between him and Su Muyu. The next day, when the Su family heard that Shi Xiu Yan had woken up, they couldn't wait to come over with gifts to congratulate Madame Shi, but in fact they came to take credit. It was all thanks to Su Muyu that Shi Xiu Yan was able to wake up. No matter what, the Shi family must show some appreciation. Congratulations. It's really not easy. Father Su stepped forward and tried to shake hands with Shi Xiu Yan eagerly. Shi Xiu Yan turned a blind eye and left his hand aside, and the atmosphere suddenly became solemn. The smile on Father Su's face froze. For a moment, he didn't know whether to withdraw his hand or to stay there. It was obvious that he didn't expect Shi Xiu to be so disrespectful to him at the banquet. Su Qing came to the rescue. "Is it inconvenient for you to move your hands and feet? Dad, you are so stupid. Why don't you consider your brother-in-law's health?" "Har har har, it's my fault, my fault." Father Su walked down the stairs, laughing to cover up his embarrassment. Su Qing took the initiative to talk to Shi Xiu Yan. She had dressed up exquisitely today, all prepared for Shi Xiu Yan. Now that Shi Xiu Yan has woken up, she naturally has to fight for the Shi family's position. How can she let Su Muyu get it for nothing? "I don't know if my sister has caused you any trouble at the Shi family. If there is anything I have done wrong, please bear with me." Su Qing smiled obediently, showing a harmless expression. Su Muyu felt nauseous when seeing this, and closed his eyes to hide his disgust. "I'm indeed stupid. Unlike my sister, who knows how to please others, I'm not good at talking and can only work silently." Su Muyu smiled, blamed herself, and fought back against her in Su Qing's way. Su Qing gritted her teeth, trying her best to keep a gentle expression on her face, and smiled along. "Har har har, sorry to make you laugh, Xiu Yan." The two sisters loved to bicker. Father Su laughed, intentionally trying to get Xiu Yan to pay attention to Su Qing. Su Qing is a smart kid, and she knows how to take care of others. She's simply a good helper to her parents. Yes, she is very caring. When she heard that her brother-in-law had woken up, she insisted on coming over to see him. Su's mother and father sang the same tune, praising Su Qing from head to toe as if they were selling a product. Su Qing lowered her head in embarrassment and said shyly, "Why do you say that? I'm not that good." She raised her eyes to glance at Shi Xiu Yan, secretly observing his reaction, and when she saw that he showed no disgust, she lowered her eyes shyly. Faced with the Su family's inexplicable infighting, Shi Xiu Yan just watched silently without favoring any side. Sister is still the best. No wonder she looks down on people with disabilities. After all, with her conditions, she can find any good family she wants. Su Muyu said lightly, and just one sentence made Su Qing so angry that her face turned blue. "No wonder my ex-boyfriend is so obsessed with you. Compared with you, I really pale in comparison." Su Muyu sighed softly, pretending to be helpless, and said admiringly. Su Qing pulled the corners of her mouth forcefully, wishing she could go up and tear her mouth apart right now. Shi Xiu Yan glanced at Su Muyu, with a playful smile on his face. It was the first time he saw Su Muyu targeting someone like this. Everything she said hit the nail on the head. She was definitely not someone who was easy to bully. Chapter 20. Pretend to match. In the evening, the Su family was finally sent away. Su Muyu was exhausted and didn't want to pretend anymore. Due to a restless sleep, Su Muyu started talking in his sleep and woke up Shi Xiu Yan. "It's all your fault, why don't you just shut them up?" Su Muyu muttered, pouting in dissatisfaction, and questioned angrily. Shi Xiu Yan propped up his face with one hand and listened to her talking in her sleep with great interest. "You made me argue for so long." Su Muyu pursed his lips, as if feeling aggrieved, and snorted a few times. Shi Xiu Yan couldn't help laughing, the corners of his mouth turned up, and the smile overflowed from the corners of his eyes. "Stinky man." Shi Xiu Yan knew that she was scolding him, and his smile froze for a moment, and his face instantly turned cold as ice. She even scolded herself in her dreams. It seemed that this woman was really dissatisfied with herself. "Okay, I'll keep you busy tomorrow so you don't have to deal with other things." Shi Xiu Yan said in revenge, lying down, turning over, with his back to Sumuyu. The next day, Shi Xiu Yan asked his assistant to print out a lot of study materials and gave them all to Sumuyu at once, asking her to complete them. So many. Sumuyu was dumbfounded. For a moment, she couldn't figure out whether she wanted him to teach her or abuse her. The assistant who was in charge of delivering the message shrugged helplessly and reminded, "Mr. Shi wants you to complete everything." Sumuyu. It seems that he is abusing himself without a doubt. Even the donkeys in the production team didn't work so hard. I understand. Sumuyu sighed and agreed with difficulty. Shi family. Since Shi Xiu Yan not only woke up but also severely suppressed Jiao Yi, Sharon was so angry that he couldn't eat and couldn't swallow this anger. How could he possibly wake up? I clearly poisoned them, how could it be that it had no effect at all? Sharon was puzzled. She had specifically told Sumuyu to place the Buddha statue next to the bed. It had been such a long time, it should finally come in handy. I'm afraid it has been discovered long ago. Jiao Yi said sarcastically in an aggressive tone. Sharon gritted his teeth, unwilling to accept this reality. I'll go see what's going on. She took advantage of the fact that Sumuyu and Shi Xiu Yan were not around and used the excuse that she wanted to take the Buddha statue to worship, which would be more effective. She hoped that Mrs. Shi would agree to let her enter Shi Xiu Yan's room. The last incident made Mrs. Shi very dissatisfied with Sharon. She had a stern face and disagreed with Sharon's request. Sharon tried hard to persuade Madame Shi, and understood her mind, and advised, "We were wrong last time, so please give me this chance to make amends. That Buddhist temple is very powerful. You need to go there often to worship for it to be effective." Madame Shi looked at Sharon with scrutiny, and after a while she finally relented and allowed her to take the Buddha statue. After getting the Buddha statue, Sharon immediately realized that the poisonous incense inside had been disposed of, and now the Buddha statue was just an empty shell. Sharon was so angry that he was shaking and almost dropped the Buddha statue on the ground. Who would have found out about this? How could anyone have gotten rid of it? The only possibility was Sumuyu. She was the one who dealt with the Buddha statue, but how could she know? Sharon was puzzled and sent people to investigate Sumuyu. But there was nothing unusual in the investigation results. Sumuyu was just an ordinary person. Why was she so vigilant? Sharon realized that Sumuyu was a strong opponent and they could not sit idly by. They had underestimated Sumuyu before. In that case, we can't let her become our enemy. Sharon immediately decided to contact Sumuyu and ask her to meet. Sumuyu was very surprised to receive Sharon's call and asked her politely what was the matter. "Come out and meet me, we can talk." Sharon didn't want to talk on the phone, so he told her the reserved address. Sumuyu was embarrassed. She didn't know where Sharon got the confidence to think that she would agree. They had clearly fallen out last time. "We have nothing to talk about. If you have nothing to do, don't bother me." Looking at the mountain of information on his body, Sumuyu pulled the corners of his mouth numbly. Sharon was unwilling to give in and took a deep breath. "You married Shi Xiu Yan just for the Shi family's money, right? If you cooperate with me, I can still give you what you want." "Sorry, I'm not interested in money." Sumuyu smiled coldly and hung up the phone. Originally, Sumuyu thought that after getting rid of Sharon, she could have some peace and quiet. But when she got home from get off work, she ran into another trouble. Ever since Shi Xiu Yan woke up, Suqing came to visit him every now and then, as if she wanted to treat coming to Shi's house as going to work. "Why are you here again?" Sumuyu asked unhappily, too lazy to pretend with Suqing. Suqing said aggrievedly, "I came here because I missed my sister. My sister doesn't welcome me." With tears in her eyes, she made a pitiful expression, letting Sumuyu be the heartless and ungrateful bad guy. "Do you like him that much?" Sumuyu asked meaningfully, looking up at Shi Xiu Yan and sneering, "Why don't I help you get together?" After a busy day, Sumuyu felt resentful towards Shi Xiu Yan, so she took the opportunity to use Suqing to annoy him. "Husband." Sumuyu suddenly called out in a sweet voice. She had never called Shi Xiu Yan like that before. Her sudden coquettish tone made his back hairy. He narrowed his eyes and asked in a cold voice, "What are you going to do?" Sumuyu was happy when Shi Xiu Yan was humiliated. She couldn't hide her smirk and simply didn't try to conceal it. "I have something to do, so I'll leave my sister to you to take care of her." Sumuyu patted Shi Xiu Yan's shoulder gently, and walked away briskly, bullying Shi Xiu Yan for walking slowly and not being able to catch up with him. Su Qing naturally would not miss the great opportunity to be alone. She sat next to Shi Xiu Yan and took the initiative to find topics to talk about. I'm not interested. After Su Qing finished speaking, Shi Xiu Yan's face turned cold and he said this without giving any face. Su Qing was a little embarrassed, but she pretended to be calm and maintained a perfect smile. Then what do you like? I can talk about it. I like to keep my mouth shut. Shi Xiu Yan's gaze didn't even linger on her, completely ignoring her. Su Qing was indifferent, knowing that this was a thankless task, so she found an excuse to get up and keep some distance from Shi Xiu Yan. Why are you pretending? Su Qing cursed Shi Xiu Yan secretly, thinking about how to change her strategy. Su Qing's eyes suddenly noticed Su Muyu's bag that she had put aside, and her eyes lit up. She looked around to make sure no one was noticing her, then she picked up Su Muyu's bag and started rummaging through it. This is a black card. He even dared to say that the Shi family didn't give him any benefits, but it turns out he even got a black card. Su Qing was extremely surprised and opened her mouth wide. She put the black card into her bag in one smooth motion without any hesitation. She raised the corners of her mouth complacently, and did not plan to stay any longer. She went back and told Shi Xiu Yan that she had something to do and had to leave first. Shi Xiu Yan felt much more at ease now that he could get rid of her, and didn't realize that anything was wrong. Chapter 21, A Show of Power. The cooperation talks with Su Muyu broke down. Sharon was extremely anxious and eager to find new ways to disperse Shi Xiu Yan's power. Shi Xiu Yan has already woken up. The later they wake up, the more dangerous their situation will be. Can't you help me think about it? Sharon looked at Zhao Yi coldly, no longer hiding the contempt in his heart, and said with disdain. She was the only one busy. What did Zhao Yi do? Zhao Yi was also impatient, and squeezed out a few words from between his teeth to perfunctorily answer her. I'm just trying to find a solution. Then what's your idea? Sharon snorted sarcastically, crossed his arms across his chest, and glared at him with disdain. Zhao Yi was so angry that he immediately picked up his phone and found a person in the address book. Wait, I'll contact you right away. When the call was connected, Xu Naowei was asking her assistant to help her put on makeup. She glanced at the incoming call reminder and answered the phone with a dignified manner. What's the matter? Zhao Yi smiled fiercely. You don't know yet. Shi Xiu Yan is married. What? Xu Naowei's face changed and she straightened up instinctively, resulting in her eyeliner being ruined. The black line was pulled from the corner of her eye to her forehead. She glared at the assistant angrily, pushed him away, and warned, be careful. After saying that, Xu Naowei picked up her phone, didn't bother to continue putting on makeup, and went out to answer the call. What did you say? She asked Zhao Yi harshly, full of disbelief. Why did Shi Xiu Yan get married suddenly? Upon learning that Shi Xiu Yan had woken up, Xu Na clenched her fists slightly and bit her lower lip, making it turn pale. It seems that your dream of becoming Mrs. Shi is about to be shattered. Zhao Yi intended to use provocation to make Xu Naowei his chess piece. Xu Naowei sternly denied it. This is impossible. I have done him a favor, he absolutely cannot abandon me like this. Even though she was the one who first disliked Shi Xiu Yan for turning into a vegetable, now she remembered Shi Xiu Yan's good points again, showing an attitude of flattering others. Tell me the details. After Xu Naowei learned the details of Shi Xiu Yan's recent condition, she strode back to the dressing room and asked her assistant to put on her makeup again. Don't wear heavy makeup, just wear natural makeup. Xu Naowei came to Shi's house with gifts, claiming to be Shi Xiu Yan's friend, and was invited in to sit down. Su Muyu pushed Shi Xiu Yan out in a wheelchair and glanced at Xu Naowei, who was waiting anxiously from a distance. She knew that this woman was the white moonlight that Shi Xiu Yan mentioned. She smiled gently, with a hint of satisfaction in watching a show at the corners of her mouth. When Xu Naowei saw that it was Shi Xiu Yan, she quickly stood up from the sofa, tears in her eyes, and called out in surprise, Brother Ian. He is still in a wheelchair. Will he be able to stand up in the future? In just a few seconds, Xu Naowei thought about this question instantly, the suspicion in her eyes flashed away, and was replaced by an innocent and pure look. You finally woke up. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't even come to see you. Xu Naowei walked in front of him, and her eyes fell on Su Muyu for the first time. A slight hostility flashed in her eyes, but Su Muyu didn't take it seriously and instead smiled at her. There's no need to tell you specifically. Shi Xiu Yan replied calmly. His attitude was a little cold. Xu Naowei's heart skipped a beat. She disappeared completely while Shi Xiu Yan was unconscious. He must have doubted her sincerity. In order to regain Shi Xiu Yan's love for her, Xu Na shed tears and expressed her grievances. I've been screwed by the company lately. They've restricted my freedom and even refused to give me a cell phone. I finally got a cell phone, so I came to find you. Xu Nawei is a popular young actress, so this excuse is more credible. Sure enough, Shi Xiu Yan's eyes relaxed a little, as if he understood her. Are you blaming me for not coming to see you? I miss you too, but Xu Na spoke in a sobbing voice, tears rolling down her cheeks. Shi Xiu Yan sighed softly and said comfortingly, okay, I don't blame you. Xu Na raised her head slightly, burst into laughter, and asked in surprise, you really don't blame me, Brother Yang? Shi Xiu Yan nodded. Xu Nawei raised her hand to wipe her tears, nodded vigorously, and said obediently, then I won't cry. Sumuyu remained silent, yawning from time to time. He was neither curious nor concerned about their relationship. She has a clear vision of who she is, that is, the nanny who pushes Shi Xiu Yan's wheelchair. After sitting down, Xu Nawei began to find topics to talk about, saying how aggrieved her life was and how helpless she was towards Shi Xiu Yan. Sometimes I feel really helpless. I always think of what happened back then. I felt so helpless too. Xu Na lowered her eyes slightly, a gloomy look flashed in her eyes, and her weak voice was tinged with a bit of crying. When Shi Xiu Yan was in danger, he found Xu Nawei beside him when he woke up. At that time, her body was covered with traces of stains and she curled up in a corner crying. Xu Nawei told Shi Xiu Yan that she was the one who saved him but was brutally raped. Shi Xiu Yan has always felt guilty towards Xu Nawei and regarded her as his savior. He also promised to be responsible for her. However, everything changed after Shi Xiu Yan had an accident. He became a vegetable and did not hear any news about Xu Nawei after waking up. It's okay, everything is over. Shi Xiu Yan didn't know what to say, so he comforted in a bland tone. Faced with Xu Nawei's tears, he was still moved. After all, she had done him a favor. You said before that you would be responsible for me, but... Xu Nawei said, looking up at Sumuyu cautiously, revealing a hurt look. Sumuyu was in a daze and was suddenly brought up. She was stunned for a moment, then came to her senses, opened her eyes wide, and looked at the two people in confusion. It's fate that things turned out like this. I said I would be responsible, and I will definitely take responsibility. Shi Xiu Yan said seriously. Xu Nawei felt a little comforted, her wet eyes turned slightly red, and she looked at Sumuyu curiously. Sumuyu. She suddenly felt a little regretful for coming here. She should have found an excuse to study earlier. Her presence was obviously disturbing some people's performance. I'll go get you a glass of water. Sumuyu pulled the corner of his mouth with a forced smile and turned to leave. Unexpectedly, Xu Nawei also stood up and said enthusiastically, I'll go and help too. Just pouring a glass of water. Sumuyu muttered with a smile, but on the surface he still waved his hand politely and declined, You are the guest, I will just pour the water. It's okay, don't treat me as a guest. Xu Na calmly stated her status. Sumuyu clearly heard her voice over. He narrowed his eyes slightly and glanced at her. A silent contest secretly boiled over between the two. Chapter 22, No match for her. Let's go, Brother Yang must be thirsty too. Xu Na smiled and gently placed her hand on Sumuyu's shoulder, pushing her to the kitchen. When she reached the kitchen, she let go, crossed her arms over her chest, and her eyes were full of provocation. You've seen that Brother Yang and I have a deep bond. Even if you enter the Shi family now, you'll have to leave sooner or later. I advise you not to take it too seriously. Sumuyu looked at her calmly, with a mocking arc at the corner of his mouth. Yeah, you're right. She smiled, nodded, and turned to pour water. Xu Na was stunned for a few seconds, then let go of her hand in anger, walked forward and grabbed Sumuyu's arm, forcing her to look at her. What do you mean? Don't you know who I am? Do you think you can beat me? Who are you and what does it have to do with me? Sumuyu pursed his lips, glanced at her with a strange look, calmly swept her hand away, and continued to do his own thing. Xu Nawei gritted her teeth, How dare you ignore me? Don't you know that everyone in the city is my fan? Aren't you afraid of being cyberbullied? Now is Xu Nawei's rising period. She is very popular and has become a household name. Sumuyu's disdainful attitude deeply annoyed her. So she's a celebrity. Sumuyu suddenly realized that she really didn't know who Xu Nawei was. After all, in her opinion, all celebrities look the same. I advise you to give up as soon as possible. Don't even think about snatching my person away. Xu Naowei said harshly. She was determined to get the Shi family. Sumuyu nodded and walked past her with a cup of water. Yeah, I got it. Sumuyu left the kitchen, and Xu Naowei stomped her feet in anger behind her. Her delicate face twisted and she almost bit her teeth off. She never expected that Sumuyu would be so arrogant and not take her seriously at all. Wait till I kick you out, and I'll see if you can still laugh. Xu Naowei calmed herself down and returned to the living room as if nothing had happened. It happened that Madame Shi was there too. Xu Naowei sat down next to her, pretending to be well behaved, and greeted her enthusiastically. Aunt, do you still remember me? Xu Wenei blinked her innocent big eyes and looked at Mrs. Shi expectantly. Mrs. Shi looked at her carefully, smiled politely and said, I seem to have some impression of her. Brother Ian was injured before, and I saved him. It's just that my company is strict, so I didn't have the chance to visit you. Xu Wenei sighed slightly, with a look of grievance in her eyes, and explained helplessly. Mrs. Shi seemed to remember something and said in surprise, that's it. Xu Wenei stood up gracefully, took out the gift she had brought and showed it to Mrs. Shi. I came here in a hurry and didn't have time to prepare properly. I brought some small gifts. I wonder if you like them. Mrs. Shi was delighted by her coaxing, and when Xu Naowei said that she had saved Shi Xiu Yan, her favor towards her continued to grow. For a moment, the living room became Xu Naowei's personal performance venue, and Mrs. Shi was the only audience. Sumuyu stood silently aside, continuing to play her role as the bullied young wife, and completely became a background board. She yawned and covered her mouth with her hand, feeling a little bored. How can you be so thoughtful? Mrs. Shi was very satisfied with Xu Naowei's performance. After the comparison, she even felt disgusted with Sumuyu. She raised her eyes and glanced at Sumuyu, and happened to see that Sumuyu was sleepy, and the dissatisfaction in her eyes deepened a little. Actually, I've always been worried about Brother Ian. He tried many times to escape from the company's control and even paid a large sum of liquidated damages but failed. Xu Naowei's eyes turned red, and her pitiful look made people feel distressed. Mrs. Shi patted her shoulder gently and comforted her in a soft voice. It's all right now, you can come whenever you want in the future. I welcome you very much. Xu Wenei was touched and hugged Madame Shi. You are just like my mother. Madame Shi's heart melted, and she wished she could replace Sumuyu immediately. Anyway, Sumuyu's stomach has been still, and Shi Xiu Yan is awake now. If he gives Sumuyu some money as compensation, they will be even. Let me ask you, are you interested in Maya Yang? Mrs. Shi went straight to the point and asked her directly. Xu Wenei was slightly startled, and glanced at Shi Xiu Yan awkwardly, her cheeks flushed, and she answered in a low voice, Auntie, why do you ask such a question? Even if I like Brother Yang, it's too late now, isn't it? As she spoke, Xu Naowei looked embarrassed and signaled Sumuyu with her eyes. Madame Shi glanced at Sumuyu openly and retorted disapprovingly, as long as you two are in love, this won't be a problem. I'll make the decision for you. Sumuyu. They said this without even mentioning the person involved, which really shows that they don't take her seriously. Fortunately, she really didn't care and continued to be in a daze without changing her expression. Sharon walked over and said in pretended surprise, Isn't this N.A. Wei? I remember that you and Yang used to have a good relationship, but we haven't seen each other for a while. Now you. Maybe I'll be the daughter-in-law of the Shi family in the future. Mrs. Shi said frankly, covering her mouth with her hands and laughing. She was extremely happy. Xu Wenei lowered her head shyly, feeling happy and secretly provoking Sumuyu. She has already said that Sumuyu can't compare to her. Hearing this, Sharon's face changed, and he reminded seriously, this is not a joke. Muyu has done a great favor to the Shi family. Sharon spoke for Sumuyu for the first time, and his abnormal behavior made Sumuyu a little alert. Naowei saved Ian's life, but don't mention it anymore. The more you talk about it, the more I think Naowei is a likable child. Mrs. Shi insisted on standing on Xu Naowei's side and intended to match her with Shi Xiu Yan. Oh, I remember that a Yang and you were very affectionate in the past, and I was afraid that Mu Yu would really be abandoned. Sharon echoed, creating a tense atmosphere. Sharon watched Sumuyu's expression out of the corner of her eye, intentionally reminding Sumuyu that Shi Xiu Yan might abandon her at any time. Sumuyu heard their conversation clearly, and so did Shi Xiu Yan, who was sitting next to them. Sumuyu sneered, touched Shi Xiu Yan's shoulder, and asked him bluntly, Will you chase me away? Won't. Shi Xiu Yan answered without any hesitation and in a clear tone. Sumuyu was stunned for a few seconds, curious why he was so sure that he wouldn't do it. Why? Aren't you in love with that someone, Shunawe? She raised her eyebrows teasingly and asked him for the reason. Shi Xiu Yan rolled her eyes at her. How could someone smile so happily when talking about her husband's deep love with another woman? Chapter 23. Give it a try. Without waiting for Shi Xiu Yan's answer, Sumuyu snorted again, reminding him to answer his question. Shi Xiu Yan remained silent, turned his wheelchair, and walked away. Sumuyu chased him for a few steps, but he blocked her outside the door. Bang! The door was closed and Sumuyu felt a gust of wind. She couldn't help but pout and complain, how dare you say no with this attitude? I'm afraid you want to kick me out right away, but you're just trying to save face. Back in the living room, the three women were still chatting animatedly, and they couldn't avoid talking about the entanglement between Shi Xiu Yan and the two women. Sumuyu glanced at the time and decided to take this opportunity to slip away. She walked to the door and sent a message to Zhang Lin, asking him to cut off the Su family's funds. Just as she was about to leave, the door behind her opened and Mrs. Shi was about to see Shunawe off. No need to see me off. Thank you, Auntie. I will come to see you when I have time. Shunawe waved her hand slightly and gave Sumuyu a provocative look when she passed by her. Sumuyu was indifferent and was stopped by Mrs. Shi when she was about to go out. Where are you going? Don't you know that Ian's doctor will be here soon? Mrs. Shi adjusted her shawl and asked her in a condescending manner, treating her like a nanny. Sumuyu lowered her head and explained to herself, even if the doctor comes, I can't help much. I have to go out for something. If you don't know how, just learn it. Do I have to teach you this kind of thing? Mrs. Shi wrapped her shawl tightly, said indifferently, and went back to their house before Sumuyu. There was no way out of the door. Sumuyu sighed lightly, turned around and followed Mrs. Shi, waiting for the doctor to come and do rehabilitation for Shi Xiu Yan. After bringing the doctor to Shi Xiu Yan's bedside, Mrs. Shi called Sumuyu over and specifically told her to learn how to massage the legs. Come here and study hard. New. Sumuyu stood obediently by the side, watching the doctor's techniques carefully. After the doctor finished doing it for Shi Xiu Yan for the first time, Mrs. Shi deliberately made things difficult for Sumuyu and asked if she had learned it. You can give it a try. Sumuyu nodded seriously, rolled up his sleeves, and was eager to try. Unexpectedly, she agreed so readily. Mrs. Shi narrowed her eyes slightly and glanced at her with suspicion. Are you sure you can do this? Don't make our Yang's condition worse. I want her to learn it, but I also doubt her. Sumuyu resisted the urge to complain and said modestly, the doctor is right next to me. If I do something wrong, you can point it out at any time. If you hurt Ian's leg worse, I won't let you off easily. Mrs. Shi warned her and winked at the doctor. What can you learn from just watching it once? Besides, she can always find fault with everything. Then I'll give it a try. Sumuyu walked up to Shi Xiu Yan and gave him a sly smile. For some reason, Shi Xiu Yan felt a chill on his back, as if he had a premonition that Sumuyu was going to take the opportunity to take revenge. Then, excuse me for disturbing you. Sumuyu sat on the edge of the bed and reached out her hand to press tentatively on his leg. After being unconscious for so long, I can still feel my strong muscles. Sumuyu couldn't help but look up at Shi Xiu Yan, imagining what he looked like before. What are you hesitating about? If you can't do it, then stop trying to save face. Mrs. Shi sneered sarcastically, feeling proud that she had caught Sumuyu's ugly face. Sooner or later she would find an excuse to kick Sumuyu out. The more dissatisfaction she accumulated, the better. Excuse me. Sumuyu retracted her gaze and looked intently at Shi Xiu Yan's legs, recalling the doctor's actions just now. She had memoized the meridians and tried pressing the first position. Is this strength okay? The only thing that was hard to judge was the strength, so she asked Shi Xiu Yan how he felt. Shi Xiu Yan nodded, agreeing that this strength was acceptable. Sumuyu had a clear idea in her mind, and continued to massage him according to the orders she remembered, without distraction, as if she was really a doctor. Are you sure? Mrs. Shi saw that she was doing it very well and looked at the doctor anxiously. A thin layer of sweat oozed out of the doctor's forehead and he shook his head in embarrassment. He couldn't find any fault with Sumuyu's actions. Not only was the order correct, but even the location of the veins was very accurate. If she hadn't studied Chinese medicine, he wouldn't have believed it. Don't do anything rash. Mrs. Shi was speechless for a moment. She couldn't find an excuse to find fault with Sumuyu, so she could only remind him guiltily. Sumuyu did not look away as she gave Shi Xiu Yan a full set of massage. Due to the long period of concentration, she was sweating all over. Okay, that's right. She raised her hand to wipe the sweat from her forehead and asked the doctor humbly. The doctor couldn't figure out what was going on with her for a moment. How could her technique be more professional than that of an intern? That's right, you did a great job. The doctor couldn't help but praise her. Madame Shi pursed her lips tightly and simply waved her hand. Then I'll let you do it from now on. Sumuyu looked up in surprise, pointed at himself, and looked at Mrs. Shi in disbelief. Mrs. Shi didn't say much to her and left the room with the doctor. She had other things to sort out, so she left Shi Xiu Yan and Sumuyu alone in the room. Sumuyu regretted it. If she had known earlier, she would have been more clumsy. She was not careful for a moment. How do you know this? Shi Xiu Yan's cold eyes revealed a hint of doubt. Sumuyu sighed and waved his hands. It's all my fault for being too smart, okay. I actually got assigned this task. Tell me, master, how many times do I usually do this to you? Shi Xiu Yan blushed, 3 times. That means there is only one more step left. Sumuyu memorized it silently and started to do it skillfully. Shi Xiu Yan felt a little uncomfortable with being touched so closely by a woman, not to mention that this woman treated him like an object. What are you thinking about? Shi Xiu Yan looked at her with deep eyes, trying to probe into her heart through her eyes. The ends of Sumuyu's hair were slightly wet with sweat, sticking to her forehead, and the sweat slid down her jawline to the crook of her neck. If you talk to me like this, I can't guarantee that I won't press the wrong place. She opened her red lips and answered the question indifferently. I don't think you look like you're seriously massaging me. Shi Xiu Yan sneered, withdrew his gaze, and returned empty-handed. Sumuyu narrowed her eyes, turned her gaze, and said in a teasing and provocative tone, I was thinking that your leg hair is a little less, is that not okay for you? Shi Xiu Yan. Sumuyu was secretly proud of herself. As expected, only nonsense could shut him up. You're thinking about this kind of thing when you lie next to me at night. Shi Xiu Yan stared at her with a hint of amusement in his eyes. Aren't you afraid that I want you to try it when you say that? Chapter 24 Differential Treatment. Sumuyu accidentally increased the strength of his hand and pinched Shi Xiu Yan's calf hard. Hiss. Shi Xiu Yan took a breath of cold air in pain. Sumuyu quickly let go of his hand, stood up apologetically, and asked him anxiously, Are you okay? Shi Xiu Yan closed his eyes and groaned. His words were self-explanatory. Who told you to talk to me? Sumuyu absolved herself of responsibility and pushed all the mistakes onto Shi Xiu Yan. Don't complain to your mother. You brought this upon yourself. Shi Xiu Yan suddenly reached out, pulled her in front of him, and forced her to look directly into his dark eyes. What are you doing? Sumuyu wanted to push him away, but she was too strong. I can't walk, but my hands are quite strong. His voice was low, slow and serious as he warned, Don't let me see that you have any bad intentions, otherwise I will turn you into a ghost of the Shi family. Use a seemingly entangled and ambiguous posture to say the most intimidating words. Sumuyu had never learned it before, but she was able to learn complicated massage in a short period of time. His intuition told him that her identity was not simple. I didn't. Sumuyu took advantage of his relaxation to push him away and touched the wrist he was holding. His wrist was already red, and you could imagine how much strength he had used. Sumuyu, your father and your sister are looking for you. Mrs. Shi knocked on the door and reminded in a bad mood, then went downstairs before Sumuyu. Got it. Sumuyu glared at Shi Xiu Yan angrily, rolled up his sleeves to cover the red mark on his wrist, and then went downstairs. It must be no good that Su's father and Su Qing came together. Sumuyu was thinking about how to use Madame Shi to drive them away, but Su's father interrupted her plan as soon as he opened his mouth. Please talk to her privately about some matters regarding the sacrifice of Muyu's mother. Father Su told Madame Shi and took Sumuyu to the door. Sumuyu crossed his arms and asked coldly, Stop making excuses. What exactly do you want to do? My business was cancelled, said Su's father angrily. The incident happened suddenly, and Su's father was faced with a huge amount of compensation. He was extremely anxious and had no choice but to come to Sumuyu. So fast. Sumuyu secretly admired Zhang Lin's efficiency. She looked at Su's father with disdain and sneered sarcastically. This guy is even faster. He came to squeeze my daughter's blood as soon as the accident happened. I don't have money. Su Muyu refused bluntly. How could you have no money? Father Su widened his eyes and scolded in a low voice with dissatisfaction. He glanced inside the door guiltily, fearing that Madame Shi would hear him. The Shi family treats you well, right? Don't be an ungrateful person. Su Muyu said coldly, if you want to play the emotional card, you'd better go back quickly. The chances of success in business negotiations with me are much greater. The only business left to discuss between them was the relics of Su Muyu's mother. Father Su understood clearly, your mother's belongings are all here with me. If you want to go back, don't refuse me. Are you sure these are all the relics? Su Muyu needed to confirm. Father Su gritted his teeth and replied sarcastically, what's the point of me keeping those junks? Okay, how much do you need? Su Muyu agreed to help him raise the necessary compensation on the condition that he could get back his mother's belongings. At this time, Su Qing was in the house. She took the opportunity to sneak into Shi Xiu Yan's room and asked him politely if he wanted her to help with a massage. Get out. Shi Xiu Yan's face was as cold as ice, and his tone was even colder. But Su Qing was not discouraged. Instead, she took a few steps closer and saw his angular features and dark, deep eyes clearly. She couldn't help but marvel in her heart. But his coldness gave people a feeling of being difficult to approach and not to be desecrated. This mysterious and noble attitude gave Su Qing a sense of forbidden excitement. I'm Su Muyu's sister. Can I give you a massage? Su Qing blinked expectantly and asked. Shi Xiu Yan kept his cold and sharp eyes and warned again, get lost. The less you talk, the more dangerous it is. Su Qing shuddered and couldn't help but take 2 steps back and ran out in small steps. Su's father and Su Muyu have already talked it out and come back to find Su Qing to go back together. Dad, I miss my sister a little bit. Can I stay overnight? Su Qing took her father's hand and said coquettishly. Su Muyu almost lost her temper at the disgusting tone. She pouted and said impatiently, there is no place for you here. Sister, is it not possible for me to just want to reminisce about the past with you? Su Qing asked earnestly in a coquettish voice. In fact, Su Muyu had no say in this matter, because His attitude was lukewarm and she did not make any statement. You? Su Muyu was about to refuse sternly when Shi suddenly came down from upstairs. Just stay. Sisters should always keep in touch with each other. Shi said with a loving look on her face that Mrs. Shi agreed to let Su Qing stay overnight. Su Muyu glared at Shi secretly, and said politely, then I'll trouble you to help me arrange a room. After saying that, Su Muyu went back to Shi Xiu Yan's room. Facing that iceberg was better than being disgusted by Su Qing. Seeing Su Muyu's dark face, Shi Xiu Yan probably guessed something, but chose to remain silent. Are you sure that if you give up halfway, you won't hurt me if you continue? Shi Xiu Yan said with disdain. Su Muyu pouted, does the young master want to call the doctor back? She doesn't even want to serve, so how can it be Shi Xiu Yan's turn to look down on her? No need, just continue. Shi Xiu Yan was unexpectedly easy to talk to. He closed his eyes and let her continue to massage him. Downstairs, Su Qing was being guided to the guest room by the servant. Along the way, she was amazed at the magnificence of the Shi family and was almost stunned. In order not to embarrass herself, she tried her best to maintain her elegance and dignity. The Shi family was so wealthy that it was beyond her imagination. Su Qing suddenly regretted that she had despised Shi Xiu Yan for being a vegetable. So what if he was a vegetable? With the financial resources of the Shi family, this problem was nothing at all. What's more, Shi Xiu Yan has already woken up. Su Qing gritted her teeth and clenched her fists secretly. How could she give Shi Xiu Yan to Su Muyu? Later, Su Qing sent a message to Su Muyu, asking her to come out and meet her. Su Muyu was too lazy to leave the room and replied briefly, just say it if you have something to say. If you want to get your mother's belongings back, do me a favor. Su Qing didn't know that Su's father had already mortgaged Su Muyu's mother's relics to Su Muyu as a condition, and still thought that she could use this to order Su Muyu around. Oh. Su Muyu was curious about what she wanted to do next, so she asked. Bring me together with Shi Xiu Yan. Su Qing was unwilling to let Su Muyu marry into the Shi family and wanted to snatch her away. Are you crazy? This is what you threw away. Su Muyu raised the corners of his mouth and replied to her provocatively. Chapter 25 Face to Face Accountability. As long as you give up Shi Xiu Yan, we'll be even from now on. Su Qing was furious and ignored Su Muyu's words. Clear? Su Muyu sneered. She had a nice idea. You and Fang Qingming had a falling out. Su Muyu paused, edited another sentence and sent it over. Are you tired of playing with Zhao Yi too? Su Qing was so angry that she jumped up and down and made a phone call angrily. Su Muyu. Do you believe me or not, I will tear your mouth apart. Whether you are willing to help me or not, you have no choice. Su Muyu didn't know what grounds she had to threaten him like this, but seeing Su Qing's helpless rage, Su Muyu suddenly felt happy. Didn't Su Qing avoid Xiu Yang when he was in a vegetative state? It's really funny that she regrets it now. Okay, I'll help you get them together. Su Muyu answered leisurely. His calm attitude calmed Su Qing down. Are you sure? Su Qing was skeptical and didn't believe that Su Muyu would be so easy to talk to. Su Muyu fiddled with her hair while chatting with Su Qing, but what I said doesn't count. He and I don't have a good relationship. Who are you on good terms with? Shi Xiu Yan came out of the bathroom at some point and Su Muyu didn't notice him at all. She was startled by him and hung up the phone guiltily. You? Su Muyu glanced down and couldn't help but want to complain. Isn't it that the person is walking very skillfully and nimbly, without even making any sound? Who are you talking to on the phone? Shi Xiu Yan asked casually while wiping his hair. Su Muyu silently put away her phone, sat on the bed, and asked teasingly with a provocative look in her eyes, Are you checking up on me? Their relationship is nothing more than the result of interests, so no one should be too demanding of the other. Shi Xiu Yan pursed his lips slightly and showed a mocking smile. Are you Su family planning to change people? Send your sister over here. Su Muyu was puzzled, raised his eyebrows slightly, and laughed at himself. How should I know? Then you still say that our relationship is average. Su Qing made it so obvious that anyone who wanted to come could come. Did the Su family think he was a fool? Isn't it? Su Muyu felt clear in her heart. She and Shi Xiu Yan had a relationship based on interests. He also gave her a sour look every day. It was good enough that she didn't say that their relationship was bad. She hummed softly a few times, and was caught off guard by Shi Xiu Yan, who pinched her chin. The flesh on her face was squeezed together, making her look a little bit cute and naive. You sleep in the same bed with me and you say our relationship is just average. You are so casual. Are you addicted to this game? Su Muyu grabbed his hand, trying to make him let go of her. She needed two hands to hold his arm, and the disparity in strength made the outcome a foregone conclusion. Unless Shi Xiu Yan let go, she couldn't break free. The cell phone suddenly rang. Shi Xiu Yan made an impatient "tsk" sound and picked up the phone. His tone was even colder than usual. What's wrong? Hearing his cold voice, Jin Hong shuddered suddenly and guessed that he was in a bad mood. The things you want are ready. Do you want them to be delivered? This was good news. Shi Xiu Yan's expression relaxed and he asked Jin Hong to send the information over right away as he just needed it. Push me out. As he said that, Shi Xiu Yan sat obediently in the wheelchair and took the initiative to restrict his movements. Su Muyu was speechless. Just stop pretending in front of her, right? After going downstairs, Shi Xiu Yan obtained the information sent by Jin Hong, and called Zhao Yi to ask him to come back. When Zhao Yi opened the door, he saw Shi Xiu Yan waiting for him in their hall. He had a bad feeling in his heart and thought to himself that something was wrong, but he forced a smile. Why are you waiting here? Your legs and feet are inconvenient, I can go find you. Zhao Yi said enthusiastically, and was about to go over to take over Su Muyu's position. Before he could get close, Shi Xiu Yan threw the information in front of him, blocking his progress. Look for yourself what these are. Shi Xiu Yan's gaze was like a blade, cold and ruthless, almost dismembering him. This. Zhao Yi was confused for a moment and squatted down to pick up the information. These materials are all evidence of Zhao Yi's corruption. Every account is calculated clearly and he cannot deny any of them. Following the clue of project funds, Jin Hong traced back to the source and sorted out all the projects that Zhao Yi had embezzled from the company. No. Listen to my explanation. When Zhao Yi saw what it was, his face changed and he raised his head in panic, trying to explain himself anxiously. What else do you have to explain? When I was away, you took over most of the company, right? Shi Xiu Yan sneered. His powerful deterrent power was not affected at all by the wheelchair. Just him sitting there was enough to make people's hearts palpitate. I don't know why it turned out like this. Zhao Yi grabbed the information on the ground, looked at it back and forth, and shouted excitedly, I was deceived too. Someone must be fooling me. Zhao Yi shouted excitedly as if he had grasped a life-saving straw, and walked forward to grab Shi Xiu Yan's trouser leg. Hey, don't touch it. Sumuyu reminded. Zhao Yi didn't want to pay attention to it. He looked up and met Shi Xiu Yan's ink-black eyes. The extremely cold look made him withdraw his hand in time. It really wasn't me. I was deceived too. I don't know how it turned out like this. Shi Xiu Yan ignored his excuses and gave him a chance to make amends, which was also his last chance. You'll have 1 week to make up the difference. If you can't, you don't have to stay any longer. What? Zhao Yi was shocked and looked down at the information on the ground with a grim face. The total amount of money he embezzled was not a small sum. Where was he going to find the money to make up for the shortfall? Sumuyu stood behind Shi Xiu Yan and watched the show. Suddenly, she thought of a bad idea. Her eyes lit up and she took out her cell phone to send a message to Su Qing. Shi Xiu Yan is in the living room, do you want to come over? She put away her phone, a faint smile on her brows, looking forward to the more exciting drama to be staged next. Since you are the person in charge, you should take responsibility for this matter, okay? Shi Xiu Yan pursed his lips and smiled, looking at him with self-control and compassion. Zhao Yi knew very well that he had no ability to fill the gap, so he grabbed Shi Xiu Yan's legs desperately and begged him for mercy. No. Please forgive me this time. I will manage it well in the future. Don't touch me. Shi Xiu Yan warned coldly. Zhao Yi was panicking, but he refused to let go, saying shamelessly, if you don't let me go, I won't let go. Are you sure? Shi Xiu Yan frowned and clapped his hands in the air to send a signal. Then a wolfhound ran in from outside the door, with dense silver-gray hair covering its neck and chest, muscular legs, and sharp and vicious eyes. At first glance, it looks like a real wolf. Chapter 26. It likes her. What? What is that? Stay away from me. Zhao Yi moved back in fear, his legs too weak to support him to stand up, and his teeth were chattering. Midnight, come here. Shi Xiu Yan waved his hand gently, and the wolfhound that had been running towards him aggressively walked to his side obediently, rubbed against his legs, and instantly became like a clingy kitten. Zhao Yi patted his chest gently and breathed a sigh of relief with lingering fear. It's just a dog. After saying that, Midnight glared at him with bared teeth and made a provocative sound. Zhao Yi instantly closed his mouth tightly, silently moved away from it, and didn't even dare to look it in the eye. I don't have time to take care of him recently, so I want you to help take him out for a walk. Is that okay? Shi Xiu Yan gently rubbed Midnight's head, his slender fingers sinking into the soft hair. Whether it was Shi Xiu Yan or Midnight, they were usually ruthless and cruel characters, but at this moment they showed their most tender scene, and the scene was very harmonious. This. Zhao Yi looked at Midnight hesitantly. Midnight bared his teeth again, revealing his sharp fangs, and glared at him fiercely. Zhao Yi was so frightened that he couldn't possibly agree. Who would run away then? I understand. I will definitely find a way to make up the money. Shi Xiu Yan stroked Midnight's fur with satisfaction and revealed a gentle smile after a long time. Then, can I leave now? Zhao Yi stood up shakily, forced a smile, and was anxious to get away from Midnight. Midnight's hostility towards him was too strong, and he was afraid that it would be dangerous if he stayed here any longer. Anyway, Zhao Yi had already promised to pay the money within the specified time, so Shi Xiu Yan was too lazy to even look at him. Zhao Yi stumbled away, but Midnight suddenly caught up with him. He turned his head to take a look, was horrified, and ran even faster. Oh! Don't come over here! With a bang, Zhao Yi fell to the ground, looking miserable. At this time, Su Qing was just going downstairs and saw a wolf chasing Zhao Yi. She was so scared that her legs went weak and she fell down the stairs. There's a wolf! Why is there a wolf here? Su Qing pointed at Midnight with trembling fingertips and shouted in panic. Sumuyu couldn't help but sneered. Midnight turned his head and looked at Sumuyu, as if he also felt her joy. He ran upstairs happily and approached Su Qing. Ath! Don't come over here! Go away, go away! Su Qing put her hands in front of her body, waving them in the air wildly, squinting her eyes and not daring to look at it. Stop messing around. Shi Xiu Yan frowned and stared at Midnight in a reproachful manner. He ran back embarrassedly at midnight and rubbed Shi Xiu Yan's hand to admit his mistake. Only then did Su Qing realize that it was Shi Xiu Yan's pet. Embarrassed by her overreaction, she cleared her throat to hide her embarrassment. She stood up, brushed the dust off her clothes, and walked down with strength and calmness. "So this is your pet? It's so cute," Su Qing said with difficulty. In order to get closer to Shi Xiu Yan, she forced herself to take a few steps closer. Midnight bared his teeth, which frightened her so much that she fell to the ground. Sumuyu covered her mouth and giggled. This was exactly the scene she wanted to see. Su Qing heard her ridicule clearly. Su Qing was furious and pointed at Sumuyu, questioning, "Did you do this on purpose? You knew I was afraid of dogs, and you still asked me to come down." Sumuyu spread his hands and answered innocently, "How would I know why a wolfhound suddenly came? I just..." She glanced at Shi Xiu Yan with a guilty look, lowered her voice and added, "I'm just following your instructions." "How dare you say that? You did it on purpose. You damn bitch, I must make you." Su Qing gritted her teeth, her face flushed red, and her distorted facial features made all her carefully prepared makeup go to waste. She stood up and wanted to rush over to grab Sumuyu. Sumuyu turned his head away to avoid her and narrowed his eyes, but he didn't expect Su Qing's attack to be delayed. Instead, he heard Su Qing scream, "Oh! Don't come over here, you bitch!" Sumuyu opened his eyes and saw Midnight biting the corner of Su Qing's skirt, preventing her from getting closer to Sumuyu. She opened her mouth slightly, a little surprised, and was very curious why Midnight would help her, even though it was the first time she and Midnight met. "Let me go. Woo." Su Qing's tone was tearful and she was almost crying. All right. Sumuyu said in a coaxing tone that it was just a gesture, but Midnight obediently opened his mouth. Shi Xiu Yan raised his eyebrows slightly, and looked at Midnight curiously as he was courting Sumuyu. He narrowed his eyes slightly, with a look of suspicion. After regaining her freedom of movement, Su Qing ran away desperately, crying and shouting in grievance as she ran. The troublesome people finally left, and the atmosphere in the living room suddenly became much more harmonious. "How do you know Midnight is coming?" Shi Xiu Yan lowered his eyes and stroked the dog, hiding his suspicion. Sumuyu said, in confusion, and replied readily, "I don't know." Shi Xiu Yan obviously wouldn't believe it. After all, the time from his appearance at midnight to Su Qing coming downstairs was so short that Sumuyu had no chance to contact Su Qing at this time. "Aren't you afraid?" Most people would be so scared that their legs would go weak when they saw Midnight for the first time, but Sumuyu remained calm and even laughed when he saw Su Qing making a fool of herself. Sumuyu smiled awkwardly, "I am afraid, but I just don't want to embarrass myself." She cast an embarrassed look at Midnight, helplessly recalling the real wolf she had encountered before. She had come into contact with more dangerous animals, so what was a successfully domesticated wolf dog? At this time, Midnight noticed her gaze and wagged its tail at her. Sumuyu's expression froze, and he quickly squinted his eyes, trying to make it stop being so friendly to him. It was too late. Shi Xiu Yan's brows deepened and he stared at Sumuyu with questioning eyes. Sumuyu pretended to be terrified, took a few steps back, and turned to leave. "I'd better leave first. There's no one here anyway, so it's embarrassing." Midnight let out a reluctant woo sound, but out of respect for Shi Xiu Yan, he didn't dare to chase after her. He could only watch Sumuyu leave with a wronged look in his eyes. Shi Xiu Yan was very puzzled. There was no reason for Midnight to have such a good impression of someone he met for the first time. He stroked its fur, leaned close to its ear, and asked it softly, "What's wrong with you? Do you like her very much?" "Why?" Midnight stuck out her tongue and responded enthusiastically to Shi Xiu Yan's touch, as a confirmation of his question. But Midnight couldn't speak, and Shi Xiu Yan couldn't understand why Midnight liked Sumuyu. He looked in the direction where Sumuyu left, with unfathomable meaning in his deep eyes. Sumuyu. Shi Xiu Yan pronounced her name word by word, and no one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 27 Failure in Competition. Su Qing sat at the door crying. The fear in her heart could not be calmed for a long time and was always shrouded in the shadow of midnight. Suddenly, she heard footsteps beside her. She looked up and saw Zhao Yi sitting next to her. Su Qing raised her hand to wipe away her tears, revealing a look of disdain, and looked at Zhao Yi with contempt. She saw clearly how miserable Zhao Yi was just now. Compared with Shi Xiu Yan, Zhao Yi was just like trash. She could no longer look down on him. What are you doing here? Su Qing asked unhappily. Zhao Yi was also in a bad mood. At this time, he was despised by Su Qing. His self-esteem was trampled on and his face looked even uglier. But he quickly adjusted his expression. After all, he still needed Su Qing's help to come up with ideas. I see you are scared, so I come over to accompany you. Zhao Yi said softly and reached out to hold her hand. Su Qing dodged his outstretched hand and glanced at him with disdain. Stop it, this is the Shi family. Besides, you and I are done. Su Qing was eager to cut off her relationship with Zhao Yi and didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore. Zhao Yi kept his composure, remained patient, and moved closer to Su Qing, deliberately shortening the distance between them. Why are you angry with me? He put Su Qing's hand in his palm and gently rubbed her palm with his fingertips. We are people in the same boat. Who wants to be in the same boat with you? Su Qing snorted coldly, trying to shake him off. Zhao Yi held her hand tightly to prevent her from shaking him off, and looked at her earnestly. If you do me a favor, I will never treat you unfairly in the future. What's the matter? Su Qing frowned, looked him up and down with a scrutinizing look, and sneered in her heart. If he didn't have something to ask her, he wouldn't be so attentive to her. Please help me get some money from Sumuyu. Su Qing's face darkened and she slapped his hand away. Why? She had already secretly put Sumuyu's black card back, so where would she get the money to give him now? Being rejected, Zhao Yi was embarrassed. He gritted his teeth in anger and threatened, Su Qing, don't forget that I have something on you. What you said is really funny. What leverage could I have on you? Su Qing relied on her innocence and did not take his threats seriously. Zhao Yi sneered, leaned close to her ear, and whispered, I took some photos that night. If you don't mind, I can let everyone enjoy them. What? Su Qing stood up suddenly and looked at Zhao Yi in disbelief. In fact, Zhao Yi did not take any photos, but as he expected, this trick worked. He stood up, put his hands in his pockets, raised the corner of his mouth, and looked away smugly. I didn't mean to ruin your reputation. Since you're unwilling to help, I have no choice but to be inhumane. Su Qing took several breaths and suppressed her anger. She didn't want to attract other people's attention in the Shi family because of this kind of thing. Her lips trembled, and she asked with great difficulty, how much do you want? Sumuyu was preparing to go out to do something important. Before she left, Shi Xiu Yan happened to notice her movements and casually asked her what she was going to do. Shopping. Sumuyu made up an excuse without thinking. He didn't have time to retract his questioning tone. Shi Xiu Yan was ashamed, as he already knew that Sumuyu was lying. Use the card I gave you, he reminded. Sumuyu couldn't help but raise the corner of her mouth, because she didn't need Shi Xiu Yan to remind her, this was what she had always thought. Her smile was misunderstood by Shi Xiu Yan as happiness and sweetness, and the atmosphere suddenly became a little subtle. Does your card have a limit? Sumuyu blinked and asked him expectantly. After all, she was planning to acquire the Su family's company, which was no small amount of money. Shi Xiu Yan smiled, are you kidding me? Sumuyu nodded in understanding, raised her chin towards him gratefully, and said hello, then I'll go first. She went to a hotel, checked into a room, and opened her laptop. She originally thought that acquiring the crumbling Su family would not be a big problem at all, but in the end she suffered the biggest setback in her hacker career. Isn't this just a broken company? Who would want it? Sumuyu was operating behind the scenes, but he unexpectedly ran into a colleague who also wanted to acquire the Su family company. At the same time, Jin Hong was calling Shi Xiu Yan to report the situation. Boss Shi, it seems someone is also trying to acquire the Su family. Shi Xiu Yan was silent for a moment, then ordered, don't give it to him. Jin Hong was a little embarrassed, the other party seems. Sumuyu's actions were too fast, and Jin Hong was almost unable to grab the items. If he hadn't been unable to handle it, he wouldn't have specially called Shi Xiu Yan to ask. Is there anything you can't solve? Shi Xiu Yan raised his eyebrows and teased, at the same time becoming curious about that person. Jin Hong admitted shamefully, the other party's strength is above mine. Shi Xiu Yan became even more interested. After answering Jin Hong, he took out his laptop and started to check the situation. Sumuyu and Shi Xiu Yan acted at the same time, vying to take up all of the Su family's shares. What are you doing? Are you trying to argue with me? Sumuyu took a deep breath and his fingers typed on the keyboard faster. The two men fought in the air, the battle became increasingly fierce, and finally reached the critical moment. Sumuyu found that there was someone he couldn't beat. He frowned deeply and felt confused. Why would such a big shot compete with her for the Su family's assets? Little did he know that Shi Xiu Yan wanted to acquire the Su family company for Sumuyu, and the competition between the two was completely internal. R. Sumuyu slammed the keyboard heavily and shouted in annoyance. She actually lost. She hasn't met an opponent in this area for a long time, and now someone appears to compete with her for the Su family's company. Who is it? Sumuyu pouted unconvincedly and picked up the phone to contact Zhang Lin. Are you free? Just by hearing her say this, Zhang Lin could tell that she was very emotional and angry. Zhang Lin asked her with amusement, "Who made you so angry?" "I just want your help to find that person." Upon learning that Sumuyu actually lost on the computer, Zhang Lin raised his eyebrows and was also very curious about who the other party was. "Okay, wait for my news." On the other hand, Su's father also noticed that the Su family's shares were being bought up crazily. He thought to himself that things were not going well and the company would soon fall into the hands of other people. He was so anxious that he was smoking. He hurriedly contacted Sumuyu and asked her to quickly give him some money. "How is your money prepared?" "It's urgent." Sumuyu was not surprised at all when she received the call from Su's father. She replied calmly, "I've been prepared for a long time. Just waiting for the fish to take the bait." Chapter 28 Return the money. "That's good, transfer it to me immediately." Su's father wanted to report the bank account in a hurry, but Sumuyu was silent. Without getting a response from her, Father Su became anxious again and urged, "What are you still standing there for? Have you forgotten that we are making a deal?" Sumuyu reminded coldly. If she transferred the money directly, based on her understanding of Su's father, he would definitely default on the debt. Father Su exhaled impatiently, "So what do you want?" Sumuyu told his father the location and asked him to come over for the exchange. As for the time, it depended on his own urgency. Although he hated Sumuyu's behavior, Su's father had no choice but to ask her to meet at the agreed place immediately. Sumuyu deliberately walked out slowly, making his father wait there for dozens of minutes. Every minute was a torment for him. "Why are you so slow?" Finally, Sumuyu arrived. Su's father stood up and looked over her anxiously, fearing that she was lying to him. "Where's the money?" Not finding anything resembling cash on her, Su's father asked her directly. Sumuyu sat down leisurely. "Where are my mother's things?" Neither of them trusted each other, so one could only hand over the money and the other the relics. Sumuyu finally got back the relics left by his mother and kept his promise to give him the money his father wanted. Shi Xiu Yan received the transfer notification from the black card. He was too disdainful to even take a second look at it, but accidentally glanced at the amount. "Isn't that a bit too many zeros after this number?" Sumuyu said that if she went out shopping, anything she bought would require so much money, even if it was just to buy several houses. After receiving the transfer, Su's father couldn't wait to get up and leave without any reluctance. Sumuyu sat calmly in the coffee shop, glancing at his phone from time to time, waiting for a message from someone. Transfer received. Zhang Lin sent a brief text. The money that had just been transferred to Su's father was now returned. Sumuyu was in a good mood. He put away his phone and went home. "What did you just do?" Sumuyu was caught red-handed by Shi Xiu Yan as soon as she entered the door. "You didn't mean..." She smiled awkwardly, reminding him what he said in the morning. Shi Xiu Yan didn't want to ask about it. He did say there was no limit, but the amount was too huge, so he had to be vigilant. "You went out and bought a few buildings without telling me." Shi Xiu Yan was so angry that he laughed. He raised the end of the sentence slightly, snorted and asked her back, "Ho." This amount of money was indeed not small. Sumuyu knew that she couldn't hide it, so she told the truth, "My dad asked me for money." As she spoke, she held up the relic she had brought back, lowered her eyes in grievance, and pretended to look pitiful. Sharon happened to pass by. When he heard these words, he opened his mouth wide, turned around and left quietly to tell Mrs. Shi. Shi Xiu Yan stared at the thing in her hand for a few seconds and frowned. "This is my mother's relic," Sumuyu explained, and the sadness in her eyes seemed more genuine. Sharon has already found Mrs. Shi and told her that Sumuyu gave money to the Su family. He actually has the nerve to ask for money. Mrs. Shi closed her eyes, and the veins on the back of her clenched fists bulged. When Sumuyu came to the Shi family, the Shi family gave a lot to the Su family. Sumuyu is really something. She just lets her squander the Shi family's money like this. Mrs. Shi became angrier and angrier as she thought about it. She suddenly stood up and angrily went to find Sumuyu. Sharon followed behind her, laughing secretly. Unexpectedly, Sumuyu got into trouble himself. She didn't need to do anything to make Madame Shi dislike Sumuyu. Sumuyu! Mrs. Shi called her word by word from upstairs. Her voice could be heard throughout the entire villa. Madame Shi, who had always prided herself on being noble, was so rude. She must have been extremely angry. Even the servants couldn't help but shudder. Sumuyu was mentally prepared, and when the lady came to him, he showed a confused look. What's wrong? Don't you know what you have done? The Shi family will be emptied out by you sooner or later, right? Mrs. Shi's blood was boiling, and she was busy imagining Sumuyu's strong ambitions. Sumuyu bowed his head to admit his mistake and accepted Mrs. Shi's scolding. What did you do with the money? Mrs. Shi, who was holding back her anger, calmed down a little and asked her in a deep voice. Sumuyu always endured Madame Shi's temper unconditionally. If he continued to be furious, it would be like a one-man show, which was very boring and made Madame Shi unable to vent her anger. My father has been threatening me with my mother's belongings. If I don't listen to him, I will never get my mother's belongings in this lifetime. Sumuyu took the opportunity to state the reason, tears welling up in her eyes until they were too much to bear and rolled down. The tip of her nose turned red, showing her grievance. My dad has a woman outside, and he has a bad temper towards me and my mom. Whenever he's unhappy, he beats and scolds me. I've suffered a lot of injustice. Only my mom is nice to me. I really want my mom's belongings back, so I would, that's why I would do such a stupid thing. By the end, Sumuyu was almost in tears, covering her face, her shoulders trembling, and her petite figure looked very helpless. Mrs. Shi was silent for a moment, not knowing how to respond. Sumuyu was half acting and half sincere. Others couldn't tell the truth from the false. They were infected by her sadness and couldn't bear to blame her anymore. All right, stop crying. Mrs. Shi waved her hands helplessly, turned back to her room, and put the blame on the Su family. This was clearly a perfect opportunity to drive Sumuyu away, but she resolved it with just a few words. Sharon was quite dissatisfied as he listened to this. Although Mrs. Shi forgave Sumuyu, Sharon still couldn't swallow that anger, and turned around to find Su Qing to repay the money. This is what your Su family owes the Shi family. If it's not you who should pay it back. Sharon said righteously, as if this was a matter of course. Su Qing opened her mouth in disbelief. She was frightened for a moment and was shocked. Aren't you bullying me? Why don't you call Sumuyu back? She gritted her teeth and retorted forcefully. Sharon sneered and lowered his voice. I thought you wanted to take her place, so I gave you this opportunity to perform, but I didn't expect you wanted to give up. These words went straight to Su Qing's heart, and Sharon had a firm grasp on her thoughts. Su Qing rolled her eyes and was almost convinced by Sharon. She wanted to marry Shi Xiu Yan, so now she needed to leave a good impression on Madame Shi and Sharon in order to have a chance to marry into the Shi family. If she rejected Sharon now, wouldn't that be ruining her chance of climbing the ladder of success? It's not easy for you, but for the Shi family, this little money is nothing. Sharon played hard to get and turned to leave. Su Qing got anxious and grabbed her sleeve. Hey! Wait! Chapter 29, Stupid but Not Bad. What's wrong? Sharon pretended to be disdainful and smiled secretly. Su Qing gritted her teeth and agreed reluctantly, give me some time, I will definitely get the money back. Har har, then I'll wait. After saying that, Sharon left contentedly, but Su Qing was frowning. Anyway, Father Su dotes on her so much, so this shouldn't be a problem, right? Besides, as long as she succeeds in gaining Mrs. Shi's favor, wouldn't the Shi family be hers? Sumuyu passed by and found Su Qing standing at the door. She almost bit her lower lip and was in a daze. Sumuyu sneered and was about to go back to the room when Su Qing stopped him. Etc. Su Qing walked up to her angrily and said harshly to her, it's all because of you. I have to ask my father to get the money back. You are the jinx of the Su family. She couldn't help but imagine that if she had married into the Shi family, she would never let such a thing happen. Get the money back. Sumuyu frowned slightly, not understanding what she was doing. Su Qing crossed her arms in front of her chest and said proudly, wait until I win the trust and love of Mrs. Shi, and then you can just wait to be kicked out of the Shi family. Sumuyu. Remembering that she had just run into Shirong coming downstairs, Sumuyu guessed that Shirong had said something to Suqing, causing Suqing to go crazy here again. I always thought you were a bad person, but I didn't expect you were really stupid. Sumuyu was amused and burst out laughing. She looked Suqing up and down with contempt and shook her head with emotion. What do you mean? Suqing looked at herself guiltily and asked angrily. Sumuyu waved her hand and replied calmly, you wouldn't believe me even if I told you. Just go back and think about how to ask your father for money. Anyway, the money that Su's father got has been transferred back to Sumuyu, so Suqing can't get it back even if she goes to ask for it. Har har, just wait. Sooner or later I will make you get out. Suqing was still shouting behind her, but Sumuyu had already entered the room and closed the door. Unexpectedly, Xiu Yan was in the room and heard their conversation outside. You switch between the two masks with ease. Shi Xiu Yan said sarcastically, and the look in his eyes when he looked at Sumuyu clearly told her that she was a liar. Sumuyu took over the conversation and sighed helplessly, if I don't act tough at home, I will be bullied by them. I don't mean to act. She casually said that her behavior in front of Suqing just now was a protective color, and that timidity was her true nature. Shi Xiu Yan made no comment and turned his eyes away from her indifferently. I'm sorry. Sumuyu said guiltily, I will find a way to return the money to you. She looked at him with sincere eyes, her pupils flickering as she looked at him expectantly. Okay. Shi Xiu Yan replied expressionlessly. Sumuyu was stunned and confused, wondering if she had heard it wrong. He actually said, okay? Is this still the Shi Xiu Yan who likes to say that he has no shortage of money? You work for me in the company, that's your repayment. Shi Xiu Yan added quietly when he saw that she was so shocked that she couldn't close her mouth. Okay? Although she didn't understand why he did this, the words had already been said, so Sumuyu had no choice but to agree. Su family. Suqing returned home, threw herself into her father's arms, and started crying without saying a word. Qing'er, what's wrong with you? Did the Shi family bully you? Father Su asked anxiously, his eyes suddenly filled with anger. Suqing sobbed and cried, the Shi family knows that you asked Sumuyu for money, and now the Shi family wants me to take the money back. What? Father Su's face turned pale. The money has already been given out to pay off his debts. How can there be any money left to be taken back now? It's all Sumuyu's fault. She talked to the Shi family. Otherwise, things wouldn't have turned out like this. Woo! Suqing pushed the blame onto Sumuyu. As expected, Su's father was furious when he heard this, and hated Sumuyu for causing trouble for the Su family time and time again. This damn girl. I shouldn't have brought her back. She should have died in the stinking ditch. Suqing felt much better after hearing this, but her goal had not yet been achieved, and she continued to sob and talk. Dad, what should we do now? The Shi family is so angry. Father Su suddenly felt a headache. He held his forehead and sat down on the sofa tiredly. The Shi family is so heartless. I married my daughter to that crippled man, and this is how they repay me. He began to curse the Shi family without thinking, as if this could divert his anxiety. Dad, why don't you find a way to raise money? If we can gain the Shi family's trust with this, can't you introduce me to the Shi family? Seeing that the time was ripe, Suqing acted well-behaved and sensible, and kept saying that she was doing this for the good of her family. When I get to the Shi family and marry Shi Xiu Yan, I will definitely find a way to help you make money. I don't want Sumuyu, that ungrateful person, to completely ignore us. Father Su was now in a panic, and he felt that what Suqing said made sense. He felt relieved and patted Suqing's shoulder gently. I really didn't love the wrong person. You are really sensible. The next day, after listening to Shi Xiu Yan's words, Sumuyu prepared to go to the company to help him. When Mrs. Shi saw that she was dressed formally and was about to go out, she asked her in a bad mood what she was going to do. I'm going to the company. Sumuyu told the truth, but unexpectedly, Mrs. Shi wanted to stop her. What can you do in the company? Your timid appearance is not suitable for the workplace at all. You should stop embarrassing yourself. Ever since she developed a crush on Xunawe, Mrs. Shi didn't even want Sumuyu to continue to have contact with the Shi family's company, fearing that if she were to drive her away, there would be more restrictions in the future. Just stay at home and take care of our Yang. The company doesn't need you to worry about anything. Sumuyu was silent, not knowing how to answer for a moment. Just at this moment, Shi Xiu Yan came over pushing his wheelchair. Mrs. Shi's expression instantly relaxed and she asked him kindly what he wanted to do. If you have anything to do, just ask the servants to do it. It's too dangerous for you to come here like this. Shi Xiu Yan did not answer her question, but stated calmly, I asked her to go to the company. It's you? Why? Mrs. Shi was surprised. She opened her mouth slightly and looked at Sumuyu with suspicion. Shi Xiu Yan has always been very picky about the people he hires. If someone doesn't have particularly good abilities, he won't even look at them. And he actually took the initiative to ask Sumuyu, a layman, to go to the company to help. What is going on? I asked her to do some things, so you don't have to worry about it. Shi Xiu Yan did not explain much, but just stated his position.